Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the latest episode of Loss of Lieutenant. I'm your host, Nick, and this evening I am joined by fellow hosts.
Jacob.
Val.
And we've also got a special guest on tonight's episode. Everyone say hello to the infamous Mr. Rob Cantrell.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Mr. Infamous Rob Cantrell.
Yeah, we've got
Welcome, Robert. Very, very excited to have you.
Now, for those watching on YouTube, Rob does not have a webcam, so we've instead of the role of Rob Cantrell will be played by a giant orange block for the length of the show. But those listening in on the podcast will not get to enjoy the orange man, which is fine. But tonight we're going to be having a bit of a chat about, and this is the main reason why Rob came on as a Canberra local. We want to do our sort of road to CanCon episode. So to have a look at the missions. Rob had some involvement with the mission selection and what went into that. So not one of the TOs, are you though, Rob? Is that right? You'll be competing?
Correct.
Cool. But give us all the insight behind the curtain into the decision-making process on those missions and everything that went into that, and then we can go do a deep dive into everything that's going on. But before we get into that, I guess we could go through a bit of an introduction though, Rob, for those who don't know who you are. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Rob? What is Rob? Why is Rob?
Blasphemy.
Oh shit. You've put me on the spot. So my name is Rob Cantrell.
It's literally the first line in the show notes.
Shut up, Nick. I'm being organic. So my name is Rob Cantrell. I'm an Infinity player in Canberra, along with a couple of other war games. And I'm supposed to say I'm one of Canberra's community organisers. I run most of our smaller local events, kind of like every 5 weeks we'll put something on. But then I'm a bit of a competition player. So like Novacore, for example, Cancon previous. So there's some other locals who will step up basically, and changes from year to year, but they're all unequivocally legends. Chris Johnson last year and this year, for example, is doing CanCon. So I play a bunch of different factions. Been playing for probably about 4 years now. Hackislam, Toha, Combined Army, some Pan-Oceania, some Dashat Company, etc. I've got a few different armies that I'll use to proxy whatever, and I run a little YouTube channel. Previously, I've been a host on White Noise. That doesn't mean anything because approximately 2/3 of the world's population has been a host on White Noise. But
I think what makes me special is that I was never actually on White Noise, as a guest. So that's what
never got.
Neither was I.
No, I never. I thought you did go on, Val.
Oh, this is as close we ever get to being on White Noise. Actually, you know what? This is something I wanted to ask. I know this is not in the show notes or anything like that, but Rob, since this is going to be the closest I get to White Noise, could you run me through the gauntlet or something? Please. I was such a fan, and I know it's not coming back. So
you're asking me to come up with a bunch of icebreaker questions on short notice. If you give me it would be terrible for you if you're willing to put up with 5 minutes of dead air. Anyway, so yeah, from White Noise, White Noise did a little bit of dabbling with YouTube, which I basically ran on that side, which meant figuring out how to do some YouTube stuff. And I've ended up with my own channel. It's just a little hobby thing. I enjoy making videos. I don't have a webcam, so that'll tell you about the quality, but it's Robert Shepherd on YouTube, and I do Infinity content, battle reports, things like FAQ breakdowns, and God help me, the occasional tier list, which Nick has been on to help me.
That's
with.
Right. We did the collaboration on the tier lists, which was loads of fun. That's your most viewed
video.
Well, I was actually having a look at some of our download stats the other week, and because basically you posted that on YouTube, and then I just took the audio and put it up as an episode or a special of the podcast, and that's our most downloaded episode of the past 3 months or whenever the period that I looked at it, 6 months, whatever it was.
That people like,
and I'm talking downloads double the next one, right? So we've got to get back on that bandwagon. That was the first definitive Infinity tier list. We need We need something to happen to be the impetus for a second definitive Infinity tier list. So we'll see. That was loads of fun.
That's me.
Yeah.
Anyone who's not checked out the channel, by the way, it's actually Rob's like insight into the game is second to none. Like genuinely have a look. There's you'll learn something, and if you don't, well, you're just not trying.
Oh, thank you, Val.
No trouble.
Well, great to have you, Rob. Where it's the type of big brain that you can bring to the conversation is something that we genuinely do lack a little bit here on Lost Lieutenant. But
Hey,
yeah, that was a purposeful dig at you directly, Val. I think
the Alpha
I think,
Zero
yeah,
of Infinity.
when-
I'm like the
when
stockfish.
when
or
Val
whatever.
joined the podcast, our collective IQ dropped by a third.
That's fair. That's fair.
But just a couple of announcements before we jump into to everything. First off, our November challenge. By the time this goes to air, it's currently the 30th of November. My birthday, by the way, which no one's mentioned yet. So you guys can all
Happy birthday,
wish me
Nick.
happy birthday. Thank you.
Did throw into
The November challenge, the Swiss Army bot will have ended by the time this goes to air, and happy to announce our December challenge, which we'll put all the details up when we post on Facebook. But the name of the December challenge is going to, and I'm going to butcher an Alan Rickman impersonation here, but we'll it's going to be called "Now I Have a Machine Gun." Her. And the idea behind that challenge is that we want you to use booty. And because having a machine gun is an option that you can get from booty, and also because it's December, it's Christmas time, you delve into Santa's sack of the booty chart and see what comes out. Die Hard is of course a Christmas movie, so that's how that all comes together. Use a profile that's got booty and tell us about it. Write up a report, send it through to lossoflieutenant@gmail.com before the end of December. That by the end of December as well, that'll also come to the end of our Q4 hobby challenge, which is an ITS14 Extras. So we want you to be painting a Sec Deck CSU, a Corsair Bashi Bazooka, or a Takimoto's toolbox bot, and send us your before and after images of that, and we'll put them all up in a big gallery, and you win some nice prizes. Also, a big shout out to all of our Patreons who have joined us on the recording this evening, our chain of command or Cox. Great to have you guys on board. $3 a month, and you too can witness the Lost Lieutenant recording live on the secret chain of command Discord channel.
We confirm if Rob is our patron or not.
No,
Robert.
Oh, Nick had to invite me into the channel because I didn't have access.
yeah.
Wow.
So
So this is like the effectively equivalent of like doing the dishes just to be here. The only way you get in. Okay.
yeah. So we've got a couple of event announcements before we jump into the whole CanCon chat. So did someone want to run me through this first one we've got here, the road to CanCon that's happening in Melbourne?
You give it a shot, Val. You're the West boy.
I think Ben's taking care of this one, but yeah, basically, I think it's on the 7th, I
Yep.
believe, road to CanCon. So 7th, it's out in Seabrook. The missions are supplies, unmasking, and cryogenics. Cryogenics obviously being very popular at the moment, and obviously those missions are all featuring at CanCon, and we'll be discussing later in the show. 2-hour rounds, that's pretty harsh, Ben. Fitness starts at 9, finishes at 6. Registration at https //
We'll add the link to the notes, but you can find all the information on the Melbourne Infinity Facebook page or on the Infinity Victoria Discord as well.
Exactly.
Um, And the next event announcement, which I think you could probably take care of, Rob, is CanCon, because that's what you're here to talk about. So if you want to just give us a quick rundown from an event announcement perspective on the ins and outs of CanCon.
So CanCon is happening from January 21st to January 23rd at Exhibition Park in Canberra. It's a 300-point, no restriction, no specials, 5-scenario lineup. We'll be playing Acquisition, Unmasking, Supplies, Supremacy, and Cryogenics. We've got 40 players registered already. You can sign up at cgs.asn.au. From there, look for the CanCon Infinity Nationals tournament.
So you got the 21st to the 23rd, which is the Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Which
Yep.
days is the Infinity tournament?
So the Nationals, quote unquote, the 5-day event is over the first 2 days, and there's going to be Aristea and potentially a narrative event on the 23rd. Failing that, casual play, pickup, etc.
Cool.
Okay. So a little bit flipped from previous years for anyone who's gone before.
Yeah, it's basically down to if you look at the weekend, do they start CanCon on a Friday or a Monday? When do we anticipate people are going to want to travel? In this case, kind of the assumption is people will be coming into Canberra on the Friday afternoon, and some people might want to, for reasons of leave, not being able to get time off work, might want to leave town on the Monday. So Saturday and Sunday is for the main event.
Yeah.
Perfect. Then we've got another one here. CanCon. So if you can't go to CanCon, then come to CanCon. That's a absolute mouthful. That's going to be on Saturday, the 28th of January, in Balcatta, Western Australia. Okay, I don't know where that is, but way out west, they're having a CanCon or CantCon tournament. 4 rounds, 2-hour rounds again, 300 points. The missions are going to be Battleground, Cutthroat, Superiority, and Umplik Center. So those are the direct action missions.
Direct action.
4 rounds in 1 day.
But it's direct action, so the missions aren't like hard missions in terms of like how your brain functions. There's not lots of things tacked onto them. So I guess, in saying that, though, they are still 300 points, but good luck to them. 4 rounds in a day is not easy. And for more information, head over to the Western Australian Infinity Facebook page. So that's all our event announcements for the coming up. We do have another announcement to push which will push the next episode, which I believe might be the final episode for the year potentially, which is going to be our AMA. So ask me anything, ask us anything. And we mean anything. We've had some absolutely amazing questions come through. There's been some great responses on the Discord. So we've got a specific channel set up on our Discord for the AMA questions. But if you want to shoot something through by email, send us a direct message. We're sort of keeping a big list of all these questions, and we've had some real solid questions. We've already sort of started putting our brains together to come up with some decent answers to, and also some real spicy questions coming through as well. So hopefully gonna ruffle some feathers on that AMA episode. Also, I did mention before about our Patreons that you can, by subscribing, you can listen to us record live. I'm thinking maybe this AMA, just for a bit of fun, we can record it on our normal Discord, like our general Discord channel, so that any of our audience can come along and listen. Obviously, like that, being able to listen to the live recordings is a special privilege of our cocks. So I will put the vote to them to see if they'll allow it. But I think that could be a bit of fun to get a good audience along to the AMA and maybe even get some more questions come through live. So if you've got anything, we'll be posting another thing up on all our social channels as well to get more people to respond to that. But the more the merrier in terms of those questions. And so that's going to be on the 13th of December, so like 2 weeks from today, sort of thing. That we'll be recording that one. But that's it for, like, I guess the announcements that we needed to run through. We do have a bit of news to talk about before we get into our main topic. This first one here, the data from the IGL ITS data since N4 has dropped. So Do any of you guys know the specifics of where this information came from or what's actually gone into that?
Didn't some of the German guys like skim it out of the API for basically from OBS directly?
Wow. That sounds technical and confusing and therefore impressive to me.
I'm not
I was-
100% on that, but if there's a video that's gone up that basically they run through the entire thing, and I think they mention where they got it from in there, but it's basically all ITS data since N4.
Val, did
yeah,
you
it's pretty
you
great.
watched that video, didn't you, Val?
Yeah, I watched to be honest, the first half an hour or 45 minutes probably all you need, and then they really start diving in the weeds. And obviously the data's not perfect, so they can't make too many concrete. Oh, they made some concrete, I guess, calls on it. I don't know, it was interesting. It was awesome in the sense that I don't know, for me, the way I saw from what I saw the data, the game's pretty balanced and it's a pretty good place. And the only thing is that I guess there's the amount of tournaments that's been run is significantly less than N3. So hopefully COVID numbers COVID
Yeah, and
COVID
I mean, when you say significantly less than N3, what are you talking about in some
events.
in a defined period of time, like in the 12 months or something?
Well,
Or
the events, I think the events were what, as per the notes, Kevin's notes, 70 events per month on average in
per month?
before COVID,
Okay,
and then after COVID it was 40 events per month, so
right.
a little bit slower.
It's pre and post COVID. The recovery is very slow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
right.
like, I'm not surprised by that at all. I mean, even now in Melbourne, we're only just now starting to ramp back up to where we were beforehand. I mean, pre-COVID, we were consistently getting one event happening every single month without fail,
Probably, yeah.
right? In different locations, we had a whole bunch of different people who were organizing them.
Mm.
And only now are we getting back to that stage. So the fact that's kind of dropped by 40%, I'm sure it's increasing though, right?
Even setting aside how difficult it is to rebuild community momentum, and people are obviously really
Yeah,
trying at that,
difficult.
it's worth noting that like we talk about post-COVID, the pandemic is not actually over.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was about to say,
I couldn't come on.
Post-lockdown,
I couldn't come on the last recording because I had COVID.
Yeah, we in Australia are pretty lucky. I can imagine some places are still
Yeah, I
having
think
issues.
post-lockdown
And
is the terminology.
yeah, and the other thing is that we, at least in Melbourne, didn't deal with it too much. But I'm sure there's some places that lost their club or their shop that they used to
Yeah,
play in because of COVID.
And, yeah.
Apart from event running, a lot of the stuff that's really interesting in that video, which I assume you guys will put a link to, is there's a bunch. So only 50% of players on average actually submit lists when they're registering for an ITS event. You should do that more, by the way, because it's how Corvus Belli skims data to balance the game. But that's still a lot of lists, and they were able to basically put together some kind of like, they use some kind of business intelligence tool to put it all into like malleable graphs, but they skimmed a bunch of really interesting performance data. And you can see like the video will go through a lot of it, but in general, win rates, like win-loss, expected result rates in Infinity are pretty tight. But there are some like super interesting bits and pieces in that video. Surprise of no one, because you're counting all of N4, right? Combined is a big overperformer. It's got the highest overall expected win rate, expected result. Very powerful faction.
More than
And
Aleph? I thought Aleph was leading.
Aleph, so combined have a much higher player count, and something like
Right.
one third of, or half of all players playing combined army end up in the top third of events.
Yeah, okay.
Aleph have some very good players and are also a very good faction. That's vanilla
Mm.
Aleph. One of the most interesting bits for me was, on average, Pan-Oceania, vanilla Pan-Oceania is an underperforming faction. But when you
Then
cut to the top
yeah.
third of players, so players who already place in the top third of events,
Mhm.
vanilla Pan-Oceania becomes a high-performing faction,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
just like, that is super
Beautiful.
interesting.
Exactly. Well, the thing is, no one denies Infinity is a game of
Mm.
decision-making skill. It's not just profile. It doesn't just come down to profiles.
I mean, Pano are still the sort of boys in blue, so when you jump into the game, they're probably the ones that people gravitate towards a little more. I mean, they are technically better at the main method of combat in the
What it
in this
tells
game.
me is and like this is going to be a surprise to no one, right? Vanilla Panoceania is playing Panoceania like by default. It doesn't have access to link team, so it'll have slightly less high watermark firepower. But when you actually like, if you're experienced with Panoceania and you start actually learning how to leverage all of the best pieces across all of the best factions
Mhm.
and all of the best sectorals, like you can do some really interesting things with Vanilla Pano, despite the fact that like if you just look at it in a vacuum, you're like, well, I'm the gunfighting faction. Why would I not have links? So super
Yeah,
interesting.
absolutely.
Well, yeah, I mean,
What?
even in vanilla, I mean, this is just off the top of my head, but the cutter and the was it the Ulan, the one that
Yeah.
gets camo?
Ulan's probably
tag
not
that-
the best tag in the game, but it's
No, but it's just the ability to use those, to be honest, really unique sort of things that they have access to. I mean, I'm always kind of a little scared of an auto sergeant or a bulleteer, peacemaker, the ones that get the ox flamethrower bots.
Peacemaker.
Peacemaker.
Like, that's fine.
Leveraging Jones probably also a real skill test as well,
Yeah.
because Panoceania doesn't have a lot of veteran and they don't really have good chain of command. She is super powerful, but she's also subject to
She is.
oblivion. Like you can just kill her in the DZ effectively.
She's
So
amazing.
if you can protect, if you're a strong enough player to protect Joan, the faction's high
Mhm.
watermark is way higher.
Absolutely, no, Jones fantastic.
Yeah.
Just so we don't spend too much time, the only other thing I wanted to mention is top 5 missions are unmasking and acquisition, frontline, firefight, and supplies. Those were the most popular missions. Any thoughts on that, you guys?
Interesting that unmasking is in there because it's a little complex, but they're all
Mm.
good scenarios. I'm not shocked to see any of them.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't tell you why I like them, but they're probably the ones that if I saw an event that had those missions, I'm like,
They're-
oh yeah, those are good fun missions.
Yeah, and
Also worth noting that those are events popularity in ITS. Those are all missions that are very easy to TO for. No objective room, only 3 objectives maximum.
Good point.
Material like you need HVTs for unmasking, but that's player requirement, right? You can put them in an ITS event really easily.
without
without
having to
having
do too
to-
much work as a TO.
Exactly.
Yeah.
3 of
What
them
about
are
the
at CanCon, and there's a reason.
Yeah, that's
for
what I
that.
was gonna say.
There's a reason for
yeah.
that. That's right.
Yeah,
But yeah,
um,
it's like I can imagine putting in Panic Room or Biotech Vol leads to a lot of mistakes and a lot of people getting angry.
Well, even just like
getting
Panic
the-
Room, you got to source an objective room, right? It's
Yeah,
Oh
that's
hard to
right.
yeah,
run an
sure.
event.
Yeah. Okay, that's true.
What about faction popularity? You guys want to touch on that?
Just briefly, where are we?
Yeah.
ISS least popular. Yes.
I'm
still a
surprised.
hipster.
ISS is the least popular. Like, is that? Yeah. Okay. Sure.
One of the least popular.
Yeah.
One
So
of the
is it? Are these in the list here? Is that in order that we've written it? Like, as in combined army is the most popular
don't know,
faction,
but-
followed by military orders, or
One army was the most popular. I know that, but the rest I don't know the order.
yeah.
I mean, the
I-
least
I-
popular really don't have much of a surprise. Although, except for Pano, I'm surprised that one hit that.
Vanilla
that's
Pano.
there. Oh, yeah, but
Yeah, it's vanilla.
still.
So those are all
Um,
either discontinued or niche pick.
Yeah.
You?
That's
Yes.
fair.
I'll take that.
That's fair. Again, no real surprises here, right?
Yeah.
Combined army,
So-
you see them all the time. Actually, maybe I think military orders is a little bit of a surprise. I mean, I know they have had like new releases and things, but
Blow up. Yeah.
a bit of a
I think
Pretty much it.
I think they did. I think they are new, but they did have like a big burst when people starting to figure them out.
They're great. They're awesome.
Yep.
But
yeah. Well,
I
I
had a game
mean,
with them
we
the
could
other day.
we could probably move on from that.
You can always come back to this. in another
IGL
episode if you need
data,
to.
but yeah, no, definitely go out and watch that video. I started watching, but didn't get through the whole thing. I mean, the video itself is like over 2 hours long, right?
Important things to note: it's the IGL guys that did the video, and they are legends. But my understanding is that it is ITS, not IGL data.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Sure. So it's the
Yeah, so-
ITS data, but was put together by the people who
By the
did
Infinity
IGL.
Global League guys. Yep.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
You think? Well, sorry. There's a bit of news that we haven't mentioned. There's a new podcast on the scene.
Yeah.
From Gorilla Miniature Gaming.
Ash from GMG has started an Infinity podcast called Tactical Awareness. I listened to their pilot episode. I enjoyed it. I think they have good chemistry, good banter. they basically went through. Like Ash is by far the most experienced of the three people on there. One of the other guys has got a bit of experience. The other guy seems real fresh, and I think that works well in terms of the dynamic of the conversation. Because if you've got someone who's a part of the conversation you're having who is a new player, that means that when you're explaining concepts to the audience as part of your conversation, you have that constant reminder that you need to explain this at a level that everyone is going to be able to consume. Because if you've got that new player sitting there with you and they're like, I have no idea what the fuck you just said, then that's the reminder for you to kind of clear it up a bit. So good luck to them. I'm sure. I mean, Ash has got a massive following already, so I'm sure they're smashing it in terms of the numbers they're getting. They talked about the FAQ though, which we can talk about a little bit as well. This is not going to be an FAQ episode. We don't have to go into the weeds in the FAQ because every man and his dog has fucking put some content out already about the FAQ. I reckon there's half a dozen YouTube videos and audio out there about the FAQ already.
And at least one very excited man on a Facebook video.
Oh, that was me. Yeah, I put something out. Yeah, I did a little video, a Facebook Live video. I had to do it twice because the first time I did it, I recorded for like 8 minutes, posted it, started listening back, and there was no audio. And like there was people watching it live while I was doing it, right?
No one said anything.
Like I had an audience while I was doing that, and no one said anything. So, so it's just people. There was like half a dozen people just sitting there watching me.
They were just sitting there going, "Look at this idiot! He's gonna put this
one of those people
online.
It's
gonna be
live.
Fucking nothing."
Sorry,
as one of those people,
sorry, go Rob.
I assumed I had a problem. I assumed I had a problem with my Facebook sound. I'm like, why the fuck isn't this working? What's going on with my Facebook?
So then I re-recorded it, and the second time I think was better than the first one because I'd had a trial run at it the first time anyway. But what I was going to mention about Ash's podcast is that they talk about one of the rules in the FAQ, and they get one section of it very wrong and talk about that section incorrectly for like a good half an hour, right?
Sorry, they're shit house. Don't listen to them, listen to us.
Which is a shame. I reached out to Ash and like pointed it out to him, and he made it clear that I was not the first person to point that out. But
sure, being on you, I have on one of his videos on YouTube been like, that's not how that rule works. I've been one of those fucking.
Oh, you've been one of those people.
Yeah. So he's probably used to it at this point.
You know what's funny though? You know how we were all fanboying over Ash listening to us and sending us some nice feedback and signing up as a Patreon and all that, and we were like, oh, Ash, But you know what? This wasn't him being a fan. This was market research. That's all it was. We've all been duped. I'm telling you, I'm so angry right now. We've all had the wool pulled over our eyes where Ash has come in, listened to our content, and he's like, you know what? I can do better than this. Anyway, I'm upset. Coming from the eastern, the Soviet bloc, I should have had my suspicions about those Americans.
This Val's opinions are not Canadian. The opinions of Lost Lieutenant as a whole.
But back on being excited for the FAQ. You had good reason to be excited. There's quite a few things that they dropped in that FAQ.
I love it. And after the FAQ came out because we were all in our little chat group. Rob had just joined in so we could prep for this episode, and the FAQ came out right that same night after we did our catch up, and I was just frantically reading the whole thing, and then did my Facebook thing, and then I was like, "Oh, we should get some content out." And I messaged like tagged Rob, and I was like, "Rob, do you want to do a collab on a video?" And you were like, "I already posted a video an hour ago."
Can we give Rob, while we have Rob the supercomputer on here, can we give him some Rob, if you want to do a bit of a monologue to, I guess, plug your Infinity the FAQ video that you've done, because I think that was really great. And also just maybe touch on some like FAQ highlights or the, I guess, most relevant changes in your mind. Because obviously, like Nick said, we're not going to cover the FAQ in detail, but it'd be worth covering things that you think are, I guess, most notable and most worth of note, just to put you on the spot.
Sure. So if people want to go to, again, my YouTube channel is just Robert Shepherd on Infinity, on YouTube, sorry. And I've done it's about a 30-minute breakdown of the FAQ. Credit to at least 2 different people who reached out to me ahead of that, and I had a good blarney with a good argument about whether or not this was a good, a good or a bad FAQ, because there are some divided opinions. Although the community at large, I think, is super happy with it. The broad theme of the FAQ basically is, so firstly, it's the first FAQ we've actually got developers' notes, and by God, I'm glad that they've done that. It's not always something you necessarily want, like peeking behind the curtain from a design perspective is something that is slightly dangerous to actually let players do. But Infinity is a game where, I think I've said a few times to different people over the course of the last couple of weeks, the rules don't work if you treat them like a malevolent genie interpreting a wish. They are like a set of tools to let 2 players work together to figure out how to play a game on the miniatures war game with the most diverse, weirdest, broadest set of tables you can possibly imagine. Just for example, the game is complex and difficult, and developer notes that are like basically say subtly, "Hey, this might not be 100% perfect wording, but this is what we want you to do.
This is what we're trying
Is
to achieve with this rule. So
this is the goal?" Yeah.
if the way you interpret it is counter to what we're trying to do, know that you are wrong.
So just to take one example, and it isn't even the biggest change that was made in the FAQ, they introduced some wording that basically is intended to resolve the issue that has existed sort of since the last FAQ with declaring skills from locations you haven't reached in an order yet.
Yeah.
And there was like a big change in the previous FAQs around order, declaration, and resolution that was intended to kind of like make the game function at the edge cases a little better, allow for things like declaring ballistic skill attack against a model that might be around to come around the corner, which is obviously something that they wanted you to be able to do. But the really, really technical outcome of that was that you could do things like place a mine and then in your next order declare shoot at someone who you couldn't see, and if they declared a response the mine would detonate, and then depending on what they did you could decide whether to even come around the corner or not, which is like, I have this threshold for rules bullshit, and it is if explaining it to a new player makes them look at me like I have betrayed them when I introduce them to the game, it is too bullshit. And that's one of those things that's just kind of too bullshit. And in their the rule actually is not 100% in terms of covering that as an interaction. For example, strictly speaking, you don't need to be in base contact with an enemy to declare close combat attack. But they are super clear in their developer notes about just not declaring skills from locations you haven't reached yet. So
Yeah.
we as the players can be like, okay, we know how it's supposed to work. Other really big changes are easily the most contentious is the change to the jump rules. Broadly very well received. Everyone has wanted you to be able to vault while jumping because of how super jump and climb, well, super jump especially, interacted with parapets. Any parapet on any building above like an inch of height basically fucked with super jump. And being able to vault while jumping now really helps. Why is it contentious? 2 reasons. Firstly, how exactly vaulting is contentious. Most players will understand what you mean, and if you put a piece of terrain in front of a player, they will know how to engage with it. But that is not the same as being able to really technically describe what vaulting is all the time, because again, Infinity has like infinitely variable tables. Players will know how to deal with it. The other thing that they let you do is measure a jump or a climb from any point of your silhouette as the starting point for the movement, provided you end the measurement at the bottom front of your silhouette as normal, which effectively allows every jump and every climb up, not down, but up, to add the height of the miniature to that jump, which means that. Sorry, Nick?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, like, sorry to interrupt, but like the fact that this means you can jump further when you jump up than you can when you jump down
Yes.
is like it's an odd result of this ruling, and I don't know what you could do to like fix it, but yeah, if you use your maximum distance to jump up somewhere, you can't then use another jump to get back to the place you started.
Yep. Correct. Which is, I have yet to see that matter hugely in play, but there are some people who have made tables that were really clearly designed for basically what was possible before the FAQ. And so those tables are now all kind of like, well, shit, things can get places I didn't expect them to.
Interesting. Yeah.
Overall, though, I think it's super positive. There's a bunch of other stuff. Those are some of the big ones. If you'd like to see half an hour of this conversation, go to Robert Shepard at YouTube.
Motorcycles. That's Kevin's
yep.
favorite change. Is
It's
the
not.
motorcycle change?
Kev
Kevin can't make it,
hates it.
unfortunately, but
Kev
he's
hates
he's a real proponent of it.
I understand what Kevin's
Objection.
objection is to
the bit-
the rules change, because it's like it's so niche. It's like this one like rule that like doesn't have any sort of other equivalent in anything else. But
But,
I like it.
But Infinity's full of those kind of things, right? There's loads of things that
I mean,
don't
it
look
look-
like anything else.
I like the
does ruin the
bikes,
bit.
and I always wished that I could use them. Like I could use more than just, or I felt like using more than just your Jimbo, and now I can. Now all those people that bought a Knight of Montesa have probably one of the scarier units that they can put on the battlefield. Coom Riders. Now I don't want to ever meet bloody Coom Rider. I think it's a good change. I understand it's a little bit more complicated than it used to be, or but you know, it's
I
good.
mean, we were playing with those bike rules throughout all of the previous season. Everyone got used to it, and now it's back to that.
Yeah.
Especially in context of the fact that they did a rebalance, there are a huge number of very viable bikes now. But I think my favorite thing about this change is that you almost can't fuck up balancing motorcycles, because at the end of the day they are silhouette 4 and can't go prone.
Yeah.
So
And
no matter how broken
I
they are,
100% share that that
Yeah.
thought, Rob, that they're self-limiting because of their size.
Yep.
Um,
you
and
just
they-
can't put that many in a deployment zone.
Yeah, and you got to also. I suppose you also got to remember that they every time they jump, like you might think, oh, it's a like Knight of Montesa, for instance, oh, it's a way of delivering, this mimetism guy. But remember, you got to remember that they lose it as soon as they jump off the bike. So
Like,
the best
I'm
thing,
a big
the
proponent of the game. I think it's fully balanced, like genuinely. I'm not even taking the piss. But I think Montesa, the Nana Montesa, is so good now. It's like very balanced. If you know what I mean.
I mean, it's now there's a whole bunch of models that I think a lot of people, for the most part, probably ignored because of the lack of cover, are now super exciting to take.
Played with them and
It's a
against
good
them recently. Law Keepers in 012 are super good without being over the top. The what do you call it? The robot motorcycle in Nomads, the Zonautica.
Zonautica.
Like that's a piece that has looked cool as hell forever, but has just like not quite worked from a play perspective. Little points
that one,
down. Like
the Zonautica has like teetered on the edge of greatness for a long time. Like it was just not usable. And now with the cover, I can
100%,
imagine it's
100%
amazing.
there now.
Just to correct what you were saying before, Jacob, about the Knight of Montesa, dismounted, he still has mimetism.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
no, he's fucking nuts.
So
Yeah, no, that thing's fucking so good.
Shit.
Yeah, so no, that's a good change, I think. What else was there that was worth changing?
that almost makes the Knight of Montesa almost like a Pano Sujan.
He's pretty good.
Yeah.
He slows down, but he gets smaller if he jumps off.
He's really good. Actually, just quick on motorbikes. If you dismount your motorbike, can they blow up your motorbike?
Yep.
Oh, sweet. Where are the stats for the motorbikes? Do we have them
on the
anywhere?
Infinity Wiki? If you look for a motorcycle, it should have. I think it's Armor 0 with 1 structure.
Okay.
So I could have shot a bunch of your bikes.
And me and Jacob had a game recently, and anyway,
you can do things like block doors to armory rooms with dismounted motorcycles.
Hey, there you go. That's a War Machine player for you.
I think I even did that once.
That's pretty good. There was, yeah, okay. Do we want to? Sorry, I'm just looking at the notes again. Aside from that,
that's probably. Did you want to talk about your game a little bit at all, or?
The only thing I'll mention about our game is the fact that in line with the current challenge that we're running to use those utility bots, my game was Jacob. In our game, my game with Jacob. Sorry, I should say. My utility bot ended up playing clutch in turn 3, where it went and uncovered his Vasily, who is now his lieutenant because of chain of command, and killed him because he used its sensor ability to uncover him. So I went hunting for his lieutenant using my utility bot, and that was pretty cool. Jacob, do you have anything to add about that game?
And were you
yeah, I
sorry,
mean-
Valley, were
sorry.
you using that extra order that you were getting? Were you using it like
all of it. All of
no,
it.
sorry,
The
Each
I was using
marksman,
an
the
extra order.
discover, all of that shit.
because he's got
Thing is,
tactical
this-
awareness, right?
Yeah, so he used tactical awareness. I also the fact that I had sensor, so I knew I was going to be able to pull him out of camo because Vasily's obviously in camo. I should probably mention that, not obviously, but yeah. So Vasily was in camo, so he obviously had a very well protected lieutenant in the sense that he was camo. He wasn't well protected in the sense that he had template weapons or ARO presence around him. He just relied on the camouflage to keep Vasily hidden. But I'm like, okay, well, the one thing that can definitely get there is my utility bot, and one thing that's definitely going to discover him is the utility bot because it's on 19s. So anyway, I got there and I got the assassination off, and that put Jacob lost lieutenant for the last turn in acquisition. It was so it made it hard for him to challenge the middle objectives or the objectives. So I thought that was a pretty good use of the utility bot.
Yeah, it was. I mean, nothing super special happened in the game. I was trying to learn tack, nothing out of the ordinary.
Yeah, exactly.
So just sort of trying to learn tack, especially after our video on them. I've been wanting to play them for a while, and I think the one thing that Val mentioned and I came away is I didn't play enough of a
Shell game.
the camo shell game. Although you did fall for that decoy that you kept thinking wasn't mine.
Indeed. Sun Tzu also missed 7 shots on 14s. That was fucked. That was 4 orders in a row. He hit once. That was a sniper version. That was fucking rude. The other thing I was
sniper Sun Tzu underperforming should be a surprise to no one, right?
no, but that's just like that's 1 in 1,000 chance for him to. I spent so the first 3 orders I rolled 6 dice. On 14s with 2 dice. I missed every single shot. Missed. So 15 and up were the rolls. And then on the 4th order, I hit once, and then Jacob made his armor save, and that was my turn 1. That was half my turn 1. I'm like, motherfucker. That was pretty bad luck.
Sorry, I've just been joined by my 2 daughters who have come in to say goodnight. So
Hey.
Maddie and Isabel, you can say goodnight to everyone. Say bye.
Good night. Bye.
Good night.
Okay.
Bye, girls.
Off we go.
Oh, did you want to touch on your spec op event in Canberra?
Yeah, sure.
That's what I
recently-
wanted to ask about, Rob. Yeah, you just go ahead. You talk about it.
Yep. So end of year mission in Canberra. We try and run events about every 5 weeks, and with holidays and everything coming up, no one was going to be available. So we did a little 1-day 3-round event. With the special was any model is a spec ops. So the special rules were 16 experience spec ops budget. Any model except for a tag or a character, because I'm not insane, can be upgraded as if they were a spec ops. You can't give bioimmunity you can't increase the BTS. You can't spend experience to both give bioimmunity and increase BTS, because fuck just having everything be bioimmunity BTS 12. And the cost of increasing a stat was whatever it would cost to increase that spec ops to that stat. So for example, we had one player who took an anathematic, and then using the Nexus spec op as a template, upgraded the Nexus spec op, spent 5 experience to upgrade it to BS14, so their anathematic could be BS14.
Right.
We had
So does that mean the cost increase to your model would be the points would be equivalent to the XP?
So
just
if
pick one.
if I'm hearing this correctly, like the spec ops might be BS 11, right? But the base model you're using might be BS 13, right? Instead of spending the points that go,
okay.
you're not spending points for +1 BS. You're spending points for +3 BS to go from 11 to 15 or 14. Or
Right,
whatever.
I see.
Not just
right,
+1.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was purely a balancing constraint. But we had some absolute doozies. We had the winner of the best meme spec ops was someone got a Vostok to Fizz 14 explosive close combat weapon CC 40.
What?
which is
Wait.
not easy to do.
Wait, CC40.
CC40. So the
Amazing.
base template
Whoever
was a
you
mod.
are, you're a genius.
When I saw that, I fucking cracked up. I had a game
Oh,
against
right.
him.
This is using rem races. Okay.
Yeah. I had a game against him, and he literally was like, "Didn't roll dice. I crit." I'm like, yeah, you do. Good point. So it's a you can get. Turns out moderator's got huge CC, and then you can stack a rem racer on top of that. Martial arts, maximum upgrades. It was a thing of beauty. The other best one was submitted in absentia. I sucks that this guy couldn't make it because this was the best. It was using Authority as a template. I want to say ballistic skill 14, shotgun, mine layer, and armor 4 to a net rod, which deploys in the deployment phase, so can't be ARO'd against, places its mine when it successfully combat jumps next to your link team.
What the
Which
fuck?
is just like
Oh,
just beautiful.
man. So
Gorgeous.
is there a rule that says net rods can't do things, or
No, it's
Yeah,
just
well,
all
normally
it's
a
all
net
because
rod
of
would
the
have
fizz
ballistic
zero,
skill
isn't it?
0.
Oh,
A
yeah.
net rod would normally have no ballistic skill score and no gun.
right? So
But if
that's
it did have a gun,
yeah. Okay.
if someone gave the router a cannon, but yeah, I was super boring because I only got to play one game and I wanted to play some O12, so I gave a Gamma Trooper, Mimetism 6, Marksmanship, and an MSV1, which is pretty cooked, as you might
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah, a little bit.
Um,
Far out.
Ultimately, it kept rolling 14s when it needed 17s to hit, so I had downgraded it in terms of actual performance. But
Yeah.
it was anyway cracking little event, very small, end of year. We had like 8 players, including one person who had hoped could come, but then their wife got super hungover, and had left her car in some other suburbs, so they were out. But yeah, no, just good little event. I got to play some O12, tried out the new bike bot, tried out the new lore keepers. Tried out lore keepers. Really liked them. Had a lot of fun with it.
Did you try the transformer bot? Is that
I
what you're
used it,
referring to?
the Aldi brand Sujan. I used it, but it didn't get to do anything because I was too busy running around with lore keepers.
Emma. Lore keepers, right? Never mind. Yeah, but very creative idea for an event, and actually, it's really good.
Yeah,
What-
not balanced, but surprisingly fun.
Yeah. I mean, it does sound like
Yeah.
a bit of fun, right? But hopefully not playing for sheep stations when you're doing that sort of jank. Cool. Well, we might have a quick 5-minute break so we can grab a drink before we jump into the main topic, which we dragged you in here for, Rob, which is to talk in detail and at length about the upcoming CanCon event. So bear with us, listeners. Let me just pause this. Okay, welcome back, listeners. Thank you for your patience. We're back again with Rob. Now we've sort of covered on all the intro stuff we wanted to talk about beforehand, so we can start to have a good chat about CanCon 2023. Very exciting. Who out of the people that are on the cast is going to CanCon? Jacob, are you going?
I'm still thinking about it. I really want to.
Jacob's a solid.
Commit.
But to be honest, that's just me keeping up with what I usually do.
And what about you, Val?
Full thumbs up. Be there with bells on.
Amazing.
Probably.
You've sort of wrangled up quite a bit of a party bus from what I hear.
No, I don't think it's going to happen. But we tried. We wanted to do a party. We wanted to do a bus of like 14 people, but it's just so hard with accommodation and all the rest of it, and people's budgets and times when they want to come up and come back. So
That would have been magical.
Yeah, it was really hard to organize. So, and we've only got one person with a rigid license as well. So,
it'd be one person doing the driving the whole way. That's rough.
Fuck him. But no, yeah, no, obviously, it's Taji boy would have had to do a lot of driving. So anyway, we'll see. We'll definitely be up there. Just how we get up there, will yet to be determined.
No worries. So yeah, as we mentioned before when we were doing our announcements, CanCon is over like the Australia Day long weekend, sort of. 5 missions: acquisition, unmasking, supplies, supremacy, cryogenetics. Is that the order? Did I get that order right as well?
The order is. Oh Jesus, I'm reading your thing now, and I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
no,
Acquisition, unmasking,
I'm pretty
supplies,
sure that's it.
supremacy, and cryogenics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so first off, Rob, if you want to just give us a bit of an overview from your perspective into the thought process behind picking those missions, what you wanted to achieve or what the team wanted to achieve, and what your overall thoughts are to begin with.
Yeah, sure. So I think I mentioned before, CanCon is usually run kind of by committee. There's a lot of responsibilities, and different people will pick up different things. It's by folks in Canberra that we then sort of like latch onto the side of CGS and run it there. In the years where it's run at CanCon, we did it off venue for last year because of COVID, but so I'm basically functionally it's a big group chat, or a couple of big group chats, sort of sorting out things like, are we going to do an Aristeo event, a narrative, how are we going to structure stuff, which I am in as a contributor to, but sort of cognizant of the fact that I am, one, a player, and two, kind of a slightly visible profile player. I was an observer of, but not major contributor to, the scenario selection process, pretty much because I knew I was going to play, so I didn't want to seriously influence the selection process. But I
Yeah.
can talk about how
People,
those conversations went.
it's funny, right? People get a bit. It can sort of trigger people a little bit if someone who's getting involved with the organization of the event is also someone who wants to compete.
Right. Yep. So it's the perception of conflict of interest. It's very important to manage.
That's right. And that was one of the reasons when I was organizing or helping organize Burn City Brawl, I was sort of 50-50 as to whether or not I was going to play or not. I was kind of leaning towards not playing anyway, but then there was a few people asked whether or not I was going to be playing as one of the organizers because that would give me an unfair advantage. I'm like, would it though? But anyway,
You can have it, mate.
I was originally angling actually to like assistant TO at CanCon, because CanCon is stressful as fuck, and I would have been very happy to have a year of just seeing everyone, and not actually waving the flag, but I got told to fuck off and play.
Absolutely,
So
fuck that.
that's where
I intend to beat you, Robert. So I want you amongst it. Thank
is
you
this
very
the year? This is the year, Val? All right.
I don't think so.
I have loved every game that we have played.
Yeah, me too.
So anyway, in terms of the process, basically it was a conversation between committee members around what it is that we want, what is practical, what can we do, what functions. So there was a bunch of back and forth. One of the committee members made up like spreadsheets of, this is what every scenario needs, this is how we get kind of like a balance, or as much of a balance as possible, of specialist mixes. So that was a consideration, right? How can we organize things? Is it feasible to include objective room missions? Probably not. One of the things that was spoken about was cryogenics. Do we play it, and where does it go? And kind of the decision was, this is one of the points put forward, it's the flagpole mission of season 14. It's the new mission. Looks like a fair bit of development has gone into it. It is going to be popular, because it's not like totally oddball. It's not like a Biotech Force scenario. And so particularly since CanCon happens in January, months after the release of the season, we felt like we were kind of safe putting cryogenics as scenario 5. It's the scenario for the season, and people will be good enough at it by January that we can make it the 5th scenario without getting some kind of like weird oddball result out of the finals because someone didn't know how the scoring worked. Although I would note we're kind of taking a bit of a risk there, because months into the season, people are just now figuring out how the scoring in cryogenics works. But we are getting there.
That's right. We're gonna clear up everything tonight.
Yeah, I do find it a bit odd to put it last though, considering that's the second day when everyone's like half of the people are plastered and very tired.
Well, it's the finals. Functionally, it's the final round, and it's the scenario for the season. So it's a capstone of the event. Otherwise, how we structured things was that there was basically a bunch of different scenario structures were proposed, and this was the point at which I entered the conversation, pretty much just as kind of like a deciding vote. There was some conversation. There was about 7 different scenarios that were being considered, looking to down select to 5, and propose an order, and you will learn something about how ITO, based on sort of how I cast my vote at this point in the process, which is that the first 3 days, if you look at how objectives are set up, they are set up for minimum possible tournament organizer effort. So I will back all of the scenario selections. I think they're well selected, but acquisition as the intro scenario, it's relatively straightforward. It's one to ease into the event. It's not too complicated. Unmasking is more complex, round 2 of the event, but critically uses the exact same objective setup, so you don't have to do anything as the TO to adjust the objectives on the table. And then round 3 is supplies, which has to be round 3 of the first day, because it's the scenario where players will pick up and fuck around with your objectives. So at the end of supplies, players will have thrown all of the objectives everywhere. You finish the day, you come in and set up for supremacy.
Right, sorry,
so
because in
4
supplies you actually take
have to
when you
physically
open
pick
it,
up the
you
objectives,
take
right?
them off the table.
Yep.
Sure.
And then round 4, set up before the day or the night before, go around and put 4 objectives on every scenario, on every table, and then cryogenics shares the exact same objective setup as supremacy, but also is the scenario where players will fuck with and remove your objective. So
Cute little thing about cryogenics is because you remove the objective, they start cleaning up halfway through the game for you guys.
it does not hurt.
Hey.
Otherwise, things that were a consideration. So I would say the committee has accidentally settled on a couple of themes, I think, throughout the event that we'll talk about. But one of basically the biggest objectives overall was trying to have kind of like a specialist focus without it just being a play hackers objective, because that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, for organizing particularly 5-round events in ITS14 and ITS13 and ITS12, is that like every scenario, it feels like, is a hacker scenario, hacker specialist bonus. And that significantly affects what factions are easy to play and what factions are hard to play, and the kind of meta, and etc.
Because that
So
bonus is everything.
that bonus is, 1, it's so significant, and 2, hackers are fucking excellent in ITS in N4. Hackers don't need a fucking mission bonus on top of being amazing models to use. But it's easily the most common type of specialist bonus. So we were just trying to find a way to have, you can't avoid having hackers, and I have no problem with a mission mix that encourages hackers. But we kind of wanted it to be not just 5 scenarios that say take a hacker. So we've ended up with kind of like 2.5.
This is what Head Chimes commented on the Patreon chat, saying that I think we need to de-emphasize hacking slightly in mission selection and meta. So
yeah, and that was conscious in this case.
Yeah, no, that's very good. And I think earlier, I believe Scott got an idea. Asked if the Maggie is viable for these missions. Rob, what would you say to that?
Is the Magariba Guard viable? Yes, 2 of these missions have paramedic or doctor bonuses, and benefit from a mobile paramedic or doctor. So the fact that your tag is a 6/4 paramedic with a 6/4 tag with a paramedic inside means that she's probably a surprisingly viable choice in both supplies and especially cryogenics.
Not bad. Now, my quick question to you and the TOs, I guess, when setting up the table. Now, obviously, acquisition has 16-inch deployment, but the supplies and unmasking have 12. Will you guys take that into consideration in terms of deployment, that extra 4 inches, or not?
One
really?
of the committee members is has opinions around exclusion zones. So we did end up with only 1 exclusion zone. There's 1 exclusion zone and 1 16-inch deployment zone scenario. Those were secondary considerations, basically.
Yeah, fair enough. No, it's great. Awesome.
Entirely by accident, but something that I am super happy with is that not one of those 5 scenarios has decompression zones.
Well, actually, what special rules do they have?
Which ones are the decompression zones again?
They're those
Exactly.
circular templates that are
Right.
saturation and difficult terrain.
Yeah, no, that's a good call.
Good if you're facing the
Um,
Keeney and Link teams.
Yeah, but
Um,
they are annoying. That
I feel like every single person hates them.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've played. I think I've played a table where there's no choice in where you put the decompression zones because they have to lie flat on the table. And every single time I've played a game, it's been like there are 4 spots on this map that can fit one, and so we will be filling those 4 spots.
I think I've played more than one game of a decompression zone scenario where both players agreed to just put every decompression zone in the same place where it wouldn't affect the terrain.
That's pretty funny.
I mean, that's an option,
That's
but yeah.
Oh, actually, you know where decompression zones should be played. Rob, do you remember? I don't know if you recall. We played on TTS that mission, that table with the the spaceship table with the crates flying in.
That was, though, in that case, those were what I would call diegetic decompression zones
Oh,
and
that was
part of the
fucking
table.
I love that table.
Totally fine. But anyway, so yeah, that was the selection process. We'll probably talk about this basically, but some running themes through those scenarios is that both paramedics and hackers, and in one case engineers, like a mix of specialists are valuable. I want to say 4 of the 5 scenarios have a special trooper, either a Bashi bazooka or a secdat, and have some kind of a bonus for terrain 0G and or super jump. Those weren't super intentional, but I think it's interesting that those have come through as themes. So you can kind of you can consistently list build for the fact that you might have an extra irregular order in your list most of the time, or like terrain is going to be a particularly relevant skill, even if there's no terrain on the tables, no like 0G terrain on the tables, which because it's not particularly common to actually have labeled terrain in particularly physical events.
I think going back to that point about like some have hackers, some have paramedics, others have engineers, having that broad spectrum of the types of specialists that you might want to bring without coattailing it into including something like highly classified or countermeasures, which kind of forces you to do that.
Yep, we don't have any missions incentivized chain of command, but if I remember correctly, the only mission that allows chain of command bonuses is Power Pack and fuck Power Pack.
Oh.
So Power Pack is a scenario that is totally good if you set a table up specifically for it, and no one at an event, 5-round event, ever sets a table up for Power Pack.
Exactly. You got an echo in the chat, by the way, Rob. Headchime is literally was saying exactly the same thing you were saying. That's pretty funny.
About stacking the templates on top of each other.
Yeah, stacking the templates was actually hilarious. Yeah. Who would have thought?
So yeah.
Cool. Any other initial thoughts then, I guess, in terms of what about from you other guys, from Val or Jacob, about what your thoughts are on the missions from just like a high level?
To me, the only thing that stands out is obviously I think they're all very tried and tested missions. As we saw from the stats as well earlier, they're some of the more popular missions. I don't think any of them are exactly risque, but I guess that's fair enough. Yeah, I guess they're all
Cryogenics is the riskiest.
Cryogenics is the wild card. And I mean, like, I'm going to have to admit here, I've not actually played it yet, so I'm not going to be able to give much input onto tactics and whatnot for cryogenics. But I'm not even saying it right. Is it cryogenics or cryogenetics?
Cryogenics.
Okay, cryogenics. Okay.
Like cryogenic storage.
Oh, well,
we actually do have cryogenics.
You know, it's because I wrote that.
Cryogenics.
Yeah.
the only other thing I have to add is that I fucking hate arm masking. Struggle with that mission.
I don't. I like it. I think it's fun.
As an ALIF player, I love it just because it gives a chance for an Azura to run around and do the entire mission by itself. I mean, look, when I saw this, I thought the first thing I thought is that it's nice to see a mission lineup where you can take every single troop in both of your lists could be a specialist if you really wanted to, and it would not disadvantage you in the slightest. Whereas the number of times where you'll see firefight or
That's
decap,
what
or
you
one,
mean.
or one of
Yeah,
the ones,
yep.
one of the ones where you get points for killing a specialist.
Yep.
Or having a specialist die or whatever. It's nice to see that this one is purely about like an
Don't get that headache.
acquisition supremacy, holding points or something like that. Right. This it takes away that almost some. I mean, this is coming from me. I know other people that are different. The almost forced split of here's my specialists list and here's my not specialists list.
No,
Yeah,
look,
I hear you.
I'll agree with that. I like firefight as a mission, and I like firefight as a mission in like 3-round events. But the fact that it's got that specific and I like the modern design of it where there's lots of classifieds, but the fact that firefight has that scoring for killing specialists means that you can't just be like, this list has a bunch of specialists. I'm actually, there are so many factions I'm thinking about for this event, and one of them is O12, because you can write an O12 list that is just like randomly 10 specialists or something, because Psychops and Lawkeepers, etc. Like there's so many models that are just randomly specialist operatives in addition to whatever else they do, and you could not play that list/archetype if firefight was in the list in the lineup unless you were pretty confident in your ability to win firefight.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I go.
The thing with firefight is, in the case of that list, for the most part, that specialist, the specialist operative almost doesn't help you at all. I think there's maybe
It's a negative
there's
skill.
maybe
It does
there's
in
maybe
firefight.
2 classifieds that you could do.
No, there's none. In firefight, being a specialist operative is a disadvantage.
Isn't
You
there
have to
one
be-
way if you can it's just have a no? It's not have a specialist, is it?
No,
Isn't there one to be in combat with a specialist?
no.
Yeah, you doing classifieds on enemy specialists, and I'm not even sure about that actually. That might be the
Yeah.
case. Yeah, it's
There you
bad.
go.
Yeah, specialist operatives can't actually achieve classified objectives. They can just push buttons.
Yep.
Unless they have unless they're like elite or whatever, something else.
Yeah, but then you could just take if they had one, a non-specialist operative profile, and you get the same shit.
And like honestly, I'd say it's a bit of personal commentary. Not this hasn't all been personal commentary. The fact that I am genuinely considering, like, there are about 7 factions that I am seriously considering taking. Whereas normally for an event, like if you look at Nova Corps, for example, it took 5 minutes with the mission lineup at Nova Corps to go, I'm playing combined, because it's hacker. I know how the metagame is going to be, and I want to win that metagame. And in this,
Did you win that metagame, Rob?
no, I didn't. Didn't lose either.
I couldn't help myself.
But if anyone would like to see battle reports from the Nova Corps event featuring some fairly impressive hacking play, go to Robert Shepard at YouTube. Anyway, like the fact that you can play, like you could play a doctor-centric faction like Hackislam or to an extent Tohar, and genuinely have specialist advantage in 2 of the 5 missions, and 2 of the important ones is like, oh, this is new. Like the fact that a motorized 112 in Ariadne is now like in cryogenics and supplies.
Oh my god,
Perfectly serviceable
so
piece, right?
Yeah, I mean, all of the bikes in Ariadne for supplies and cryogenics are really good. Because they're all really cheap, really
Incredible.
quick.
Yeah. So I'm sitting here.
Smoke armed.
I'm sitting here looking at O12, Yuching, Tohar combined, Ariadne, Nomads, and Hackislam as like factions that I would genuinely like to play at CanCon, and which I think I can play at CanCon, and that is the longest list of factions I have ever considered for an event.
Nice.
I mean, we'll talk.
I really like that, right? I really like the fact that
Yeah.
it's not you're not hemmed in to your on your choices because of the mission. And it opens it up to the regular players as well, right? If you are a player that only has 1 faction or 1 or 2 factions, you don't have to look at this mission list and say, "Oh shit, I can't achieve this because of the army that I play."
Is there any faction that doesn't have
ISS?
at least, like 3 paramedics?
ISS has a Dakini paramedic and a Soft Protect. That's it.
But a Dakini paramedic is great for this. It costs nothing and it's super quick.
bit of commentary on ITS14. The only reason I'm considering, so this is a specialist heavy, relatively specialist heavy mission mix. I would not normally consider Yuching for that, except that in this season I have a tactical awareness forward observer for 16 points. So I can chuck a Weibing or whatever it's called in combat group 2 and have it kind of like take some of the stress off of my primary combat group while it runs around in group 2 and pushes buttons in supremacy and like picks up one box in supplies. So that my primary combat group can get by with fewer specialists. So the season as well kind of does enable that to an extent.
Nice. Just quickly on the play breakdown, I see 32 interstate players, 8 Cambrarians.
Yep, at time of writing.
Beautiful. Let's hopefully get those numbers up. So if you haven't signed up, please do. It'd be great to see everyone there again. Do we know if the Red K Cup's coming, or did we
Yes,
get
the
any?
Red K Cup will be at CanCon.
That's exciting.
Please represent your state. So that'll be awesome.
For those who aren't familiar with what the Red K Cup is, it's a tradition that began at Novacore. It is a plaque that is now a traveling trophy that goes to, it's the top 3 placements from each state, so you don't need a large attendance to win the cup. The top 3 placements from each state have their combined objective and tournament points. Basically the best performance from amongst your top 3 players of every state is the winner of the Red K Cup for that event. So ACT won it at the first Novacore, New South Wales won it at the second Novacore. From the look of the Melbourne contingent coming up, maybe Victoria is in with a shot this CanCon.
Fucking tease. Don't do this to us, Rob. You're gonna hurt our feelings so bad.
Mate,
You're gonna build
like,
us up, and then we're gonna.
look, I mean, I don't want to trash talk my adopted state, but like you look at those names, it's quantity over quality there, right?
What the fuck, you son of a bitch! This says the man not even coming.
Exactly.
Oh,
That's-
There were a
that's right.
few. There were enough notable names in there for me to go, yeah, okay, that's a good one.
Considering what I heard, considering what I
No,
heard
man,
about,
I'm not good at this game, right? The last tournament I played in, I came dead last, which has not happened in a long time. So, I've forgotten how to play Infinity. So don't listen to me at all.
I fully expect Val to be sabotaged by his friends, given what they were trying to do to him at Burn City Brawl, which is just get him absolutely hammered. Slash potentially trafficked, if I remember.
Traffic. No. To be fair, BCB, that game against you when I lost, I was like, oh my god, I hate losing the first game in an event. It really takes all the steam out of you. So
I wouldn't know.
he's
Oh.
come back at me. I've brought the worst out of it in Rob.
I'm gonna fucking regret saying that. I'm gonna regret that.
man.
You keep up with that. You keep up with that. You keep up with that. Rob and Val's gonna come and Tanya Harding.
I'm gonna. I've just signed my own death warrant.
Don't be silly, mate. Don't
now
be silly.
losing
Back
round 1.
yourself.
Okay,
Don't
well,
be silly. Back yourself.
Well, we could probably jump into a bit of a deep dive into these missions now, and start talking about them more specifically to each one and what we want to do and how we're going to achieve victory round by round. So
we can get that tempo.
Sure. So first off, round 1 acquisition. I'm happy to talk through this one. Just to sort of set the scene for the table of what it's going to look like. You've got a 16-inch deployment zone, right? Which is big. In the center is a tech coffin, and then equally spaced sideways from that are communication antennas. Now, to score points at the end of the game, have an activated communications antenna, so the ones on the sides, 2 objective points for each activated communications antenna. At the end of the game, control a communications antenna, 1 objective point for each controlled antenna, and at the end of the game, control the tech coffin, which is 3 objective points. Now, there's also 1 classified objective. Now, it says control in some of those things as well. So activate for the antennas means you have to get a specialist to push the button with a whip roll. To control something, you need to be touching it at the end of the game, not in a marker state, and your opponent has to not be touching it. So that's basically how you win to get your points, where your 10 come from on that one. Special special rules here. The control specialist troops, engineer and hacking bonuses. So engineers and hackers get +3 to their whip rolls, and can also make two rolls. So that's big. You've also got a Corsair. So in this scenario, you get a Bashi bazooka for free, which is cool.
Huge.
The new ITS season rule for the Corsair. We've got low gravity zones as well. So the zone of operation is low gravity. Movement restrictions are not applied. However, all troopers possessing terrain 0G or terrain total automatically gain super jump. And the mission does end in retreat as well. So, what are our thoughts on round 1 acquisition?
Who wants to go first?
Have you muted yourself, Val?
Yeah, sorry, I was gonna say sorry, I did. I just wanted to get in there real quick, saying the Corsair specialist troop, just so everyone's aware.
Good to know.
I think all of the
Actually-
free troopers that get added, so Corsairs and Sectets, I think they're all specialists, right? Admittedly, not very high whip.
But like in a
But
pinch,
it's a nice addition to just to
Yes,
have.
yep. I'll lead with some commentary if you want.
Go for it.
is
So acquisition is a scenario that is very balanced in my mind between going first and going second. So it's not even though it's all end of game scoring, it's not by any means a snap pick one way or the other. Firstly, just as a general bit of philosophy, end of round scoring like supremacy, I consider if you can going second is good. But end of game scoring is not the same. If your opponent has 3 rounds to step on your neck, then you are not necessarily inherently advantaged by going second. And on
Mhm.
top of that, in acquisition, 16-inch deployment zones makes attacking easier. You as the defensive player will probably, if you're going second, you will probably use the depth of your deployment zone, or at least you will if you're being canny. But your opponent gets a 4-inch head start on any attack that they want to make on you that is originating from their deployment zone. Which means that if you want to go first and play very aggressively in the scenario, you can. You're just committing to kicking your opponent's teeth in without putting them in retreat
Yeah.
before the end of the game.
So you're pretty much committing to not quite, but having a good alpha strike, right? You want to immediately sort of put your opponent on the back foot and have them have to try and climb their way out of their deployment zone.
That's actually a perfect summary, Rob. Especially the distinction between supremacy and acquisition, the difference in the scoring or quadrant control and supremacy and acquisition.
Yeah,
the fact that
round scoring versus game scoring, right?
Yeah, that's huge. You're right. And by the way, Kevin, welcome to the cast.
Yeah, Kev,
Hello.
Kev is on.
What?
Hey, g'day. Good evening, Kevs.
Sorry, I'm just lurking in the background. Don't want to interrupt. Don't want
you're part of it, mate. Get amongst it.
to upset the tempo of the conversation.
I hope you're silly. Get amongst it.
Don't you start. I can feel that Val's on the precipice of going onto a tempo rant.
I hope I'm
no,
coming through okay. I'm just in the middle of the desert.
You are actually.
Phone, so
You're actually coming on great. Rob, how do you prefer to play this? Do you prefer to play this by kicking someone's teeth in and then pushing buttons, or?
It depends almost entirely on the army that I'm playing against. So if I am playing against an army I think I can survive an attack from, army or player, then I will be more likely to pick deployment. But so classic example, right? My opponent is playing nomads. I don't care what whip their lieutenant is, but I know that they are probably going to have counterintelligence, puppet bots, the ability to bracket my deployment zone, guided missile strikes, and at least one really big gun. Nomads are one of the best go first factions in the game, and they just natively have all of those tools. I don't particularly want nomads to go first if I can avoid it. Kind of similarly, Shazvastii, common access to counterintelligence and the scariest impersonator. So if I can, I'll avoid letting Shazvastii go first. It's that kind of thing. It's more in unmasking, because first and second is balanced. I'll pick, if I win the roll, I'll pick or at least prefer based on kind of how badly I think my opponent can kick my teeth in. And if I don't think they can, like if I'm playing against a Varuna player and I don't look over at their tray and see maximum availability Knights of Montesa, then I'm probably going to pick deployment, because Varuna classically don't love trying to make close assaults on the first turn.
They don't.
Yeah. So,
yeah, right.
So you're more likely to decide like first turn, second turn, depending on your opponent or the actual armor you're playing, or is it a bit of a combination of both?
Depending on what my opponent is playing in acquisition. It's how
Okay.
much of an alpha can they deliver.
Yeah, no, that's
nice.
fair enough.
Um, sorry.
As far as I suppose list building, what do we typically like look for in actually, because you've got to control these objectives at the very least. What do you look for to like hold your that middle objective?
I'd
Yeah.
like to make a really quick point, just before you do get into that, about what Rob was saying about first and second is balanced. I would largely agree, but I do think that this season has thrown a spanner in the works with the Takamoto's sensor bot being really easy to just slot in. A common tactic for me in acquisition was a couple of hidden deployment specialists on either the two buttons and pray that my opponent doesn't bring sensor, which often didn't happen. Now you can't rely on that strategy because you're quite likely to come up against somebody who has a sensor bot and who will just censor one of the buttons and potentially ruin your like last turn play to get the win. Because the outside boxes are worth 2 points, and if you're also controlling them, it's an extra point. So it's like 3 point swing per box, which can be quite a swing on the last turn.
Yeah, I was gonna say the mission redesign in this, where it used to be the middle one used to be worth more than the outer two. Now they're all basically in line because if you push the button and control it,
I don't think that's changed.
not from last season, but from the times past.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
Like,
so I was like, I think it does lead to potentially, going first can be stronger if your original tactic, back in previous seasons was to do what I just said with hidden deployment specialists.
Yeah. Because you don't want to just focus on the middle one, right? So they're all worth quite a lot. Just on Jacob, what you were saying, how would you take the, I guess, control of them in like our game? One of the things I really focused on is denying you the ability to deploy any camo markers near them by putting my camo marker near one of the objectives. That's a viable strategy, I think.
You can deploy a camo marker near a different camo marker.
No.
You just can't.
Yeah, you
You
can.
just can't put it. You just can't put a mine near a camo marker.
No, you can't
specifically
deploy camo
it specifically applies to it applies to mines. You can
Only mines.
If you've got a camo marker and I've got a camo marker, I can put it right next to him. What I cannot
Actually,
do is
deployable
put it.
so it applies to crazy callers as well.
I can't. I am not allowed to place a deployable with its trigger with a enemy camo inside of its trigger area. That's specifically for mines.
So is it a deployable thing or is it? I thought it was a camo thing.
No, it's deployable.
It's deployable.
All right. All right. Then I've been playing that wrong.
That's it, Val. You forfeit.
I
win.
That's why people listen to the podcast, Val. You learn things,
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, so but yeah, I guess well, there you go. Then having those 4 deploying specialists within one order of touching the button is a very viable strat.
Yeah, but I mean, if you could do that, and you might accidentally put your camo marker right next to an enemy mine, and then you done goofed, right? But too bad.
Yes,
And there's
if they deploy the mine first.
early in the game either. If you've got a 6-inch deployment zone and you've got to hold on for 3 turns,
Because the buttons flip. That's something we haven't mentioned. The buttons flip. So if the 2 outer ones, they're worth 2 points each. But the thing
they're
is,
worth. Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, they're worth 2 points each. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
2 points each, and they flip. So if you push one, Kevin, early, and then I push it later on, it becomes mine. So
That's right.
That's quite a contention there. Quite a fight for it, which is good.
Just while we're talking about mine layers in this scenario, it is obviously a scenario where the humble Libertos shines because it can deploy on the 24-inch line. But there is kind of generally in acquisition, there's a little bit of play and counterplay. It's an open, like, mine layers are always going to be in some, like, useful in some capacity. They set the line of skirmish kind of a little earlier forward. They force your opponent to attack with certain assets rather than others. Blah blah blah. I am a big proponent of at least a little bit of midfield in, I think actually probably most of, but especially supplies and acquisition. But in acquisition in particular, both players have a Bashi Bazooka, which means both players have a disposable irregular trooper that brings its own hollow echoes, which if you want to send
Mm.
orders is very, very good at just clearing out a minefield.
Shit,
Um,
that's
literally
an
just rush the
incredibly good point. You've got
I
like
w-
if they've got 2 mine layers, you've essentially got 2 free dudes to throw at the mine.
and like
orders because you've got to move out of your DZ. But
Well, no, well, but can't you deploy the Bashi and Hollow?
yeah, but it starts in the deployment zone, so you have to
Sorry,
move.
sorry, can't you drop the
walk on
combat
when you
drop
when you parachute, can you parachute with the whole
Only parachute, you can't drop.
Again, off the table edge, so it's the same distance. You're easier just walking off of the out of the deployment zone.
That's a good
You can see-
point.
Oh,
Yeah,
right, yeah,
coming
okay,
from
well, I
the
see what you're
coming
saying,
from the
yeah.
edge of the table as opposed to coming from your deployment zone. That's an interesting point. One question I was going to ask was, what are our opinions on the Corsair in this mission? I was going to say it's kind of not amazing because having 16-inch deployment zones vastly reduces the amount of space he's got to walk in from the side. But that point that you've just made, Rob, is fantastic in that if your opponent has littered the midfield with deployables, then your Corsair is just going to walk through and waste those mines.
Oh yeah.
I had actually a game of acquisition recently where my opponent took the Bashi Bazooka, and I think on might have been turn 3. I think he walked it on one of the flanks, out of line of fire, and then just spent one order to move and then place an EM mine, and then and then he went. I think then he went into suppressive fire and then re-hollowed, and I'm like, how do I get to that button now safely? And it really wasn't easy when you've got suppressing fire Bashi with a EM mine that's kind of watching the area. That was quite a good play.
Very cool.
So back to what I was asking before. What makes a model, a profile, whatever, something you want to take with the idea that they're going to be the one, like if you have the, I suppose, the unfortunate luck of going first, to be the one that's going to hold the tech coffin.
Oh, nice. That's a good question.
Because I think for the buttons, the main thing is pressing them. It's 2 points to press them, 1 to hold them. So you want to press the buttons, and holding them, I feel like it's generally going to be left up probably to the specialist that ended up pressing the button itself. But the middle one just has to be held.
I think at the very minimum, courage. You want courage.
Yeah.
If you can have smoke bombs, smoke grenades, I think that's useful as well.
Smoke, you got to be real careful with smoke because the temptation is to just drop it at your feet.
Exactly.
But if you do that, you then end up. I mean, unless you,
combat troops.
yeah, right. You either close combat, or if they got stealth, they just walk up and cancel your holding of the coffin.
Exactly right. Yeah, so that's
and
tricky.
They might go and hit the 2 buttons, take them instead because you've got a softer piece there, and just cancel out that 2 points in the middle and just decide that that's the way they want to win the game.
Yeah.
Good rule of thumb is that having something that you trust to be tough enough to survive a turn with the enemy attacking it is what you want, especially going after the central objective. So that might be a tag in suppressive fire. It might actually be a model with a nano screen. Is a particularly useful piece of equipment in
I suppose
acquisition.
you can't get behind it at that, or you don't get an advantage for getting behind it.
Or out of cover.
Well, that's what I'm saying is like you get behind it, like because if you're
if you can get behind him and shoot him out of his line of fire, then that's definitely an advantage. But you're not going to catch him out of cover specifically.
What I'm saying is
sometimes. But if you're controlling the middle objective, you've got a some modicum of cover.
Well, it depends on whether you're using a token or a piece of terrain for the objective. And if you're using a token, then you don't have cover because it's not a 3D piece of terrain.
Is there a plan at CanCon to have physical pieces on all the tables, or?
Yeah, I think that's a must.
It will depend on the table. So we have basically for tables that don't have their own objectives, we have a treasure trove functionally of tokens, but they are 2-dimensional. Which means that they don't provide cover. Now, you'll know at the beginning of the game, you'll be able to look and see, in this objective, I'm not going to be able to claim cover from those. But if someone has 3D objectives, then they'll be cover providing.
I mean,
As
I've,
always,
I've,
That's contentious for me. I
I've,
think
I've always,
this mission
I've always
needs
played
to
them as
have
S3.
yeah, well, that's not
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, yeah. You know, if they
No,
if they are if they are a
I
token,
know what
then
you
it's
mean.
supposed
I
to
know
be.
what you mean, Jacob.
Yeah.
I've always done that. I've always done that because
I think this mission
in
has
the
to have
rules
it.
for the in the rules for the, well, sorry, in the ITS rules they talk about using the like the physical tokens from.
The ITS rules are super clear in terms of
But you are right. You are right.
if it's a token or a terrain piece.
Yeah. No,
I actually
you are
like
correct.
that dichotomy because it changes, it very subtly changes the balance. If you are playing on a piece of terrain on a table where there are three-dimensional objectives, it actually is like it's materially likely to make me be more comfortable going first because I know I won't be parking models with their ass in the open. If I'm the first player, I go kick my opponent's teeth out, take cover, hunker down. If I can't take cover and hunker down, then it changes whether I want to go first or second. I think that's good.
I think it's too much of a
Actually,
swing on the
No.
initiative roll then for me, because if you can't claim cover, going first in acquisition is not. That's really disadvantage. I think that's a
No,
massive disadvantage.
but Rob just talked about the fact that going first with a 16-inch deployment means you get to kick the teeth into.
But you're forced to play it one way. You're forced to play it one way. You can't possibly then play the scenario either, because you can go first and play it a different way where you take board control and you slowly creep up on the objectives, and then you basically minimize how much damage you take throughout the game, and then turn 3 you overwhelm the enemy with the amount of presence you have on the tokens. By having cover, and meaning that when they firefight you in that turn 3, they don't have enough orders to get all the guys off the tokens and push their guys onto them. But if you don't have the ability to claim cover, you're forced to play it one way, which is alpha striking your opponent.
I'm
Or
gonna
having pieces that are tough enough.
solve this problem for you, Val. Take 3 objectives with you when you go to when you go to CanCon. And if you get a table, with tokens, put your own objectives down.
I was gonna say no, because it depends on the table. I think Val will have to, if he wants that, he's gonna have to buy those new packs that are coming out and provide it to the CanCon.
As a personal observation, I would not be surprised if. So this is something that I do. If I am making a table where we are using 2D objectives, you will almost always see me place pertinent cover near that terrain.
Right near it.
I was just about to ask, like in that case, would you put like a bit of scatter around?
You'd hope.
Yeah. And again, that's comes down to how important is the role to pick table sides, like et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. No, I mean, look,
I know. I'm just a bit worried that that's putting too much emphasis on that initial role.
It's interesting.
I like the way you.
I think
I honestly like the way Rob's thought about it. I think that's an interesting way of thinking about it.
Yeah, going back to one of Rob's original points around first versus second, right? While you're scoring well, if you're going, or you're scoring well, quote unquote, if you're going second because you get those final actions, the 16-inch deployment really helps your alpha strike for going first. But not only that, low gravity area also makes some of your pieces potentially a lot more maneuverable by giving things with terrain 0G or terrain total super jump. And with the way that jump works now, meaning that you're vaulting while you're jumping, you're using your silhouette height as well, that alpha strike on those terrain total pieces with super jump is going to be scary.
Just as a bit of commentary as well, like I personally think that going first in N4 is very strong, and if a scenario and a table combine to make going first a little less advantageous, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
Any other final thoughts before we move on from acquisition?
One. So this is a Corsair scenario along with a bunch of others which give you sec debts. So when you're list building for CanCon, think about the fact that a lot of the time you're going to have one more irregular than you plan for. Most factions can capitalize on like a certain number of irregulars in a list. Usually it'll be like 3. If you've got 4 command tokens and no other use for them, you can kind of play 3 irregulars relatively easily. You will have an extra irregular in many CanCon missions, and this is one of them.
Nice.
That's a very good point, because you can't like just because it's an irregular, it's not like it's not like it can't be converted like a normal irregular can to be used on someone else as well if you're in a pinch. So
And I mean, just in that mine layer scenario, just because it's an extra, it's not like don't just throw it away. Right, it has uses. I remember when we played the Kenfinity tournament, it didn't happen, but I almost killed Tariq with my Bashi.
Bit of a question for people: which Bashi profile do they like most? Because I'm of two minds about it.
I'm just having a quick look at them now. I mean,
I think the specialist one, like
They're
They're all
specialists.
no,
they're
but
all specialists.
the one that in the originals. So the
Yeah.
last
which
one, the
one?
most expensive, I think.
Rifle.
Is
No,
the
I'm
best way of
I'm
saying it.
really leaning towards rifle like shotgun EM mines.
Alright,
I
let's see.
think
Yeah,
EM
that's
EM
almost
mines are real
Right.
tasty.
I
So
played.
mine.
That's the one I meant. Yeah.
I played a couple of games with the AP rifle breaker pistols, and I didn't mind it. But what I kept coming back to was, it's if I am attacking with a Bashi Bazooka, it's probably with the intention of trading it because it's a cheaper regular.
yep.
I couldn't give up the template. I really need that shotgun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that's why I'm looking at like the rifle light shotgun air mines
Mm.
has so much utility in that you've got a rifle which has okay range bands. For those close encounters, you've got your light shotgun for a +6 or your template, and you've got mines. If you just want to spend your irregular and you don't have anything else to do, put an EM mine down somewhere. It could really come in handy later on, sort of thing.
Defensively, that Bashi is also going to be the most useful. If you are not parachuting it, and I usually won't, I'm going to pretend that it's one or two or three other things to mess with my opponent. And there's a big difference between an Armor 2 model BS11 with like a pistol or an Armor 2 model with a shotgun and some mines guarding a corner.
The only other one that I might consider would be maybe the SMG chain colt. I know that it's really you're hamstringing yourself on range, but I still think the SMG is a great gun, having like the different ammo types, and a chain colt means you're able to intuitive attack as well, which you can't do with a shotgun. Although you can do it with mines.
Not the same effect though. You're not revealing the enemy template,
True.
enemy marker.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're hoping to like really go deep or some sort of close combat scenario for parachuting, the SMG would shine because you get easier to get up in their face.
Cool. Well, we could probably move on to mission number 2. Who'd like to do a little bit of reading on second round for me? What's round number 2? Unmasking. It's a fun mission. Go for it, Jacob. Take it away.
More than happy to talk unmasking. So I'll start the same as you did and talk about the table. So standard deployment of 12 inches. You do have in this one an exclusion zone that is 8 inches or 8 inches from the middle. It's a 16-inch wide zone. So essentially you've got from your deployment zone to 16 inches up. You can deploy if you've got forward deployment or whatever. Cannot go further than that. The big thing to always remember that is that you can't drop in the middle of the game in that exclusion zone either.
That was a learn.
So as for the objectives, you got to kill the enemy designated target, but only if it's been previously revealed. Kill the enemy decoys, but only if they've been previously revealed. Kill more decoys. Kill more enemy decoys, but only if they've been previously revealed. At the end of the game, have the same number of activated consoles as the adversary. At the end of the game, have more activated consoles than the adversary. At the end of the game, have your designated target not killed.
Yeah, so as an overview of what you're trying to achieve here, right? You've got each player has got 3 HVTs on the table, and you need to go push a button and try and reveal those HVTs and then kill them. One of them's the proper target, the other 2 are decoys, and that's where those points come from, comparing decoys versus the designated target.
So this does have retreat. I'll get to the console in a second. It's nothing really different. The main thing is the subterfuge, which is, like I said, deploy 3 HVTs. with the normal rules for HVTs, so not inside or on top of buildings, 4 inches out of your deployment zone. So they're an okay way of marking the edge of the exclusion zone if you need to mark that. And you decide your designated target. If I remember, at the end of your deployment zone. We'll talk about that in a second.
It's when you deploy.
When you put them down, you've already determined which one is the real one.
So yeah, it says this choice is made by each player during the deployment phase, which means it can be the very last. Yeah, but it can be the very last thing you do after you've put down your very last dude, because the end of your deployment phase is still part of your deployment phase.
Yeah, fair enough. I'd pay that. So it's after your reserves, I guess.
Yeah, there's no reason not to. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, so you activate the consoles as per usual. There is the hacker bonus for this, so +3 2 dice. When you touch one of the consoles, you then pick one of the models, and your opponent needs to reveal whether that model is the designated target or a decoy. As for anything else, there's no
only thing
special. There's no Corsair or Sec deck. So,
no special
terrain
stuff
or anything like that. So it's just
no classified
good old
objectives
unmasking. Yeah, so it's just good old unmasking. Do the objectives, kill the decoys.
The one thing that I've missed when we played at Brown City Brawl here, Jacob, the fact that the consoles can be, when you push them and somebody else pushes them, they switch over.
I don't know if these ones do they?
They do, yeah. That's the only way you can press the same console twice, is if your opponent takes it and then you take it back.
Huge.
Oh, right, yeah.
Oh, sure.
Huge. That's a real game changer.
No, I know I've talked about my strategy for this on previous episodes when we've covered unmasking, but I'm a big fan of putting all 3 HVTs right next to each other and then just castling up that entire area and making it very difficult for my opponent to get anywhere near it. That's generally been my go-to strategy. How do you guys
find that works if you're going first versus going second?
Well, if I like doing that if I'm going second. Because then I'm able to put things up in ARO and really lean into an ablative defense. Sure, you've only got like that 4 inches between your deployment zone and the exclusion zone, but you can, if you, depending on what the table looks like and where you've chosen to be your sort of bunker location, you can still put things in there that are going to be able to ARO stuff. If there's like a little nook to put your 3 dudes in, and you can cover that with deployables, you can cover that with camo troopers, all sorts of nasty stuff. It's gone all right for me. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best way to do it. I like to do it that way just because it kind of makes my life a bit easier in that I don't have to worry about thinking about stuff that's happening all over the table. I just have to focus on a certain area, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have a way that you're inclined to put the 2 decoys compared to the HVT? Like, are the decoys sort of in front body blocking? I know that they technically can't, but or is it?
It doesn't like when you're doing it that way. It doesn't really matter because, if you're like, sure, your opponent's got to because there is the school of thought that you can, put if you spread your HVTs out, make the one that's the one that is in the most obviously easily defensible place is actually a decoy, right? By having them all together, you're not really leaning into that those types of subterfuge.
I mean, admittedly, you are forcing your opponent potentially, because I feel like maybe, I don't know if I played Kev and he did that or something like that. I think, oh no, I played you, Val, and you had 2 really close to each other. You're forcing your opponent to press a bunch of buttons, especially if they, if you've got no indication of which one's the good, like which one's in the clearly defensible place, which you might be the one you pick. You're forcing your opponent to, if they make the wrong guess, potentially press all 3 buttons to get like at least a high amount of points by killing the designated target.
But I don't think that's I think that's the same case regardless of how you've played it in terms of deploying your HVTs.
No, what I mean is if you've got your HVT, like one HVT in an obviously defensible sort of position, and that is your decoy, which is what I've done sometimes. I suppose it's an argument for not doing that. If you do it where it's a little less obvious, especially the way you're doing it.
Yeah, if you think, well, but I know that he might make that one a decoy, but he knows that I know that, so maybe I don't make it a decoy, maybe I do make it the HVT. Then
it's the right all over again.
How deep do you go, right? How many levels through that?
I've poisoned your cup, but I've poisoned my cup. And I'm with your cup, so whose cup is poisoned?
Yeah,
they're both.
Yeah.
We unfortunately don't have a Sicilian here.
That's great. That's great.
On that, like I think the last, I don't know, half a dozen times I played Unmasking, my opponent has just gone, "What's the nearest HV2 to the button I've just pressed? That's the one I'm going to shoot."
Yeah, I was going to mention that. That is the biggest takeaway from the more I practice that scenario.
Yeah, like the whole refuse thing at the beginning is really just a whole lot of shite.
Yeah.
It really depends on the table, right? Because if you spread your HVTs out, all you're doing is putting them closer to each of the buttons.
Yeah, and it's like killing decoys is still worth points. So if you push a button, ask for the one that's closest to that button you've just pushed, then spend a couple more orders to go over and kill it. Doesn't matter what it is. If you achieve that, you've gotten more points, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you're getting your tempo from in this mission.
And it removes that kind of psychological impact. Like I remember the first time someone did it to me, I was like, whoa, look at my devious plan. He'll never figure out which one it is. And there's like, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I'm like, fuck you. Like, just unravel by just picking the closest one. And that I learned my lesson.
I've also found, I've done this in a couple of times I played Unmasking. I have deployed all 3 of the, I do this when I deploy all 3 HVTs in the same place. And I will also sometimes do it if I have deployed them all in like reasonably defensive locations. Just roll a fucking D3. Like to determine for myself which one is real. Don't leave the choice up to me, because every time I try and do that, it's the like devious plans within devious plans, and I get one step ahead, and my opponent just picks the one that's nearest to the objective they just unlocked and kills my real target.
Yeah.
I think really the only thing that you should always do with these decoys is like just don't have it so that somebody can like from their DZ see it with a sniper rifle or a HMG.
Yeah,
that's really the only like thing I would say you have to do is make sure you don't do that.
So have all of them so that they can't be seen from the deployment zone, right?
Every HVT.
Yeah, or just like just really long range where you've got a good gunfighter that can press a button and shoot from 8.
Sorry, Rob, what was that?
No, I was just agreeing, basically.
Okay.
Like every now and again, you'll see someone do the thing where they like put one HVT in a super obvious this couldn't possibly be real location, and when they do that, I'll kill it and get the free point. Thanks.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
They're like, you guessed it. It's not my designated target.
Okay.
I don't know if it's been discussed yet because obviously I'm coming in and out of the chat, so apologies for this if it's already been answered. But table setup, is that a consideration for unmasking? Like, I mean, I know you can't set up every table, but when you rock up to a table and you're like, there's nowhere I can put 3 HVTs that they're not just hanging out with their dicks in the wind.
I mean, I might look at the table and go, if I get this side, I might put my dudes there, and if I go get this side, I'll put my dudes there. I don't think I think about it that much because ultimately it's down to who wins the dice roll.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I just mean like when people are setting up a table, like I don't know who's doing the scrutineering of the tables, but it's somebody like you realize that HVTs have to be deployed on ground level, and all these buildings prevent HVTs from being deployed anywhere near the 16-inch line. Are you going to be looking after that, Rob, or is it anyone doing?
Well, Me, probably not, because I'll be playing, but it is something that the TOs will do. And I wouldn't be surprised if players have any concerns about a table and they just flag it with the TOs.
Exactly.
You know, worst the TO can say is not right now, but most likely they'll go and have a look. I know in previous CanCons, there have been cases where, you know, the occasional very extreme table was actually taken out of rotation for one reason or another. You know, at Nova Core, I saw a couple tables get adjusted either the night of, stuff like that. TOs want people to have a good time.
Yeah.
When setting up tables, it'll mostly be down to the players, and players tend to have very different opinions if they think about it at all. Whether or not, like I've seen tables where it's intentionally really difficult to hide your HGTs. I've seen tables where it's very easy on one side but very hard on the other, and I've seen tables where the players have totally misinterpreted how certain terrain is meant to be played, and you know, all plans are out the window by the person who set the table up. So,
Yeah.
talk to your
What about
opponent.
first or second in this mission? What do you guys think?
I'd like to go first if I could. But with the right army, especially if you've got counterintelligence, get the buttons pressed, make your guesses. All right, maybe have some defense on the buttons to make it more difficult for your opponent.
I do think this is a mission where deployment is important, not so much for going first or second, but just for choosing a table side that you want to have easier access to the buttons and the ability to deploy your HVTs in defensible positions.
100%.
But that's often not, you often don't get both of those. Like sometimes you'll be able to get to the buttons, but then your opponent's HVTs are on the other side of a building. And so I guess you've just got to figure out like which of these do you value the most, and with the exclusion zone it can make getting to the buttons tricky. So I think I tend to look at that side of things, but I know it's also bitten me in the arse before, because I remember playing a game of unmasking where I was like, oh sweet, this side's so good for hiding my HVTs behind, and then we set up and I was playing against an Onyx player, right, with the Unidrawn plasma sniper, and I'm like, oh, hang on, I gave him the sniper nest. I didn't even think about that. And like getting to my buttons was like nigh on impossible. But my HVTs are really easy, like really hard to kill, but it didn't help me win the game.
Yeah, right. That's interesting.
I mean,
I think it is a okay.
Go ahead.
These sort of considerations is what makes this mission lineup like really good. Is the fact that it's not like firefight and frontline when really the consideration of what the table looks like isn't super important. Right here, it's like when you're deciding on sides or how to deploy or what have you. It's what
Unmasking
firing lanes can I stop?
Like that's I think it's one of the top 5. It's one of the top 5 missions played every year for ITS for a reason, because it's well balanced. It makes you think. The table is really important. Your deployment of the HVTs is really important. It's just a really good mission.
Yeah.
Rob,
Yes.
you had something to say on asking in terms of going first or second?
Just in terms of going first or second. I find for this one, it's actually down to the faction that I'm playing with almost as much as against. So like with acquisition, I mentioned if I'm playing against, like, it's balanced both ways. If I'm playing against nomads or a good go first, like if there's going to be a Sujan, whatever, I'll probably pick based on turn order, based on not getting reamed if I think my opponent can ream me. With unmasking, because it's a very hacker-centric mission, if I am playing a list that's designed for info war dominance, I will snap pick first, because I'll have a list that is designed to kill all of my opponent's hackers on the first turn. And if you do that in unmasking, the game is just unbelievably hard for your opponent.
Yeah.
If I'm not trying to do that, and I've got like a more balanced list, I'm trying to do a couple of different things, it's maybe a list that is designed for a couple of different scenarios, deployment, like the table side, can be really significant. There's an exclusion zone, so alpha strikes are a little harder, just a little. I typically play vanilla factions, so I'm not with a huge, like some but not massive midfield presence. So it doesn't impact my defenses too much. Like if I'm playing Hack Islam, for example, it's Ghazi Matawi jammers. I don't need an exclusion zone, helps me defend. And if there's a spicy table side that's like easier to get to the buttons, easier to defend the HVTs, being able to do a run on the last turn to make a kill and suiciding your things to do it is way more attractive as a go second option, if you've gotten a good table side in the process.
And you can also determine the balance of the buttons in the middle, or not, if you're going second as well.
Yeah, right.
That's
There's
worth quite a
there's
bit
points on the
as well.
line for that.
Yeah,
A lot of
and
points on the line,
I've done that before where I played unmasking, went first, and or it may have been just one with pressing buttons, but very similar. I think it was what's it called, mind wipe, but very similar where I saw my opponent had this had the O12 what's the killer raptor, had the killer hacker raptor. So I went, okay, I'm going to press the button closest to that raptor. Immediately, this was in mind wipe, and sit there and make sure that raptor has the hardest time getting out of his deployment.
Right. Okay, gotcha.
Right.
Because you identified that as the piece that's probably going to go and do his objective.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, do we have
Alright.
any final thoughts on unmasking before you want to move on to round 3 and see what's up on there?
I wanted to point out just one other thing is that, is that mine's still their blast radius is still 8.5 inches, so they still can reach the objective even from the with the exclusion zone. So if you've got a bunch of mine layers, they're still going to be able to cover and make
Have
it
some
more
effect.
difficult to get.
That
get
depends
to
entirely
those.
on how big the objectives are, and usually
Yeah.
they're large enough. Like a silhouette
Well,
3
yeah, but
objective,
they
for example.
yeah, but they can stop that that push continuously forwards.
Having a plan to defend your HVTs and deployment zone in unmasking is super useful. Pieces like a hacking network, jammers, your own mine, like mines to defend your HVTs. If you're doing like a HVT nest, like Nick said, having a plan for defense in this scenario when you've got assets that are so important, super relevant.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, let's move on to supplies then. Round 3, final mission of day 1. We're on 12-inch deployment zones again, and yeah, these objectives have not been touched all day. 3 objective points along the center line of the table. It's almost like that was intentional in the decision to put this line up. But supplies is one of the classic Infinity missions, right? You've got the 3 boxes along the middle. You're trying to open them up, take the stuff inside, and keep it. So at the end of the game, control a supply box is 2 objective points for each supply box. At the end of the game, control more supply boxes than your opponent for 1 point. And at the end of the game, your adversary does not control any supply boxes, gets you another point, and then 2 classified objectives as well. We've got low gravity zones again, so terrain total and terrain 0G are getting a super jump. Doctor and paramedic bonuses, so +3 whip rolls for doctors and paramedics to open the boxes, as well as double rolls, which is great. And then your sec debt. So this is the first time we've seen a sec debt in the CanCon lineup. So your CSU you get for free, which is cool. And then we've also got Intelcom card, counter espionage. So when the game ends and the players count their points, each classified objective fulfilled by a player that has a symbol with like the plus, or like the, is that a plus sign?
It's
like
essentially any medical doctor
Yeah,
objectives counteract forward observer
will
objectives.
cancel a classified objective fulfilled by the opponent that has the target symbol on it. Okay.
So I think it's any of the like designation ones.
I know this is a bit out of order, but I absolutely despise Intelcom counter espionage in all of these missions.
People forget about them.
I hate it.
Yeah, this one especially because no one ever remembers it, and it's also a feel bad for the one time that you remember it, and you're like, "Hey, what classified did you accomplish? Oh, that one? Fuck you! You don't get that point." It's just like, oh, really? Oh, dude, really?
Has it ever come up for anybody?
Yeah.
It's not that common that it matters in supplies, but it matters a lot in capture and protect.
Oh.
Or no, what is the one? What's the one with the engineer? No HVT engineer looting and sabotaging.
One
of those.
Yeah, I know capture and protect has no
Looting and sabotaging them,
Are you,
where it's
talking,
very
are you talking about the one that has armored fury for
yeah. So in
cave?
looting and
Yeah,
it's
looting and
most
sabotage, yeah.
commonly contentious in that one where if you do an engineer scenario, engineer classified, you get 1 extra point, and it's super common for both players to successfully destroy the objectives in that one. So it just tends to be to the decider.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah.
But at least in that case, like you probably it's doing the engineer one, you get an extra point. I suppose it sucks if you can't do half
If
of
you
them.
don't
Like
draw it,
if you,
yeah.
or if you're playing Toha or a faction that doesn't really get the ability to do many of the engineer ones. But
It's a low impact rule in supplies.
yeah, but I know that this one I don't mind that one so much.
Still hate it.
Considering that
Still hate it.
considering that Predator
Totally fair.
exists, but yeah, this one, yeah, just being like, fuck you, I did a doctor thing. You drew the two designation things, get stuffed.
Yeah. Anyway,
I've never picked an objective based on intel com. You just pick based on the ones that you can realistically do with the army that you've got.
Exactly.
I feel like it would almost be great if these intel com ones stopped people from taking, because the problem with this one is you're already going to be taking the doctors and the paramedics. It'd be more interesting if the symbols were flipped, so that you might take a forward observer instead of just having doctors and paramedics.
Anyway,
I mean, we can. Yeah, there's no point talking about some sort of dream state that we want to create into the game when we're just talking about how the missions are working for this tournament. So, supplies. What do we think? How's it gonna go?
I think
anyone. You hate it, Kev.
We all talk about.
I hate supplies as well. I hate it. Supplies. I'm asking. I fucking suck at both those missions. Like,
yeah, I mean, I hate it because I suck at it, not because it's a bad mission. I really like supplies.
But you play ISS. You play ISS and get a soft attack. Super quick, super quick, high with. Sorry.
No. We've got good units for it. People have I just suck at it. I just don't know how to. I don't know how to.
One of my worst scenarios.
I mean,
yeah,
if I go playing Ariadna,
I don't know what it is. Like I'm just constantly too many occasions where someone's just walked on an AD Spitfire on turn 3 and just gone blap. I'm going, damn it, I forgot that was a thing. Admittedly, that was in N3 when it was a bit easier to hide AD. I might not have had that problem in N4.
Yeah. Really tough mission. Really tough mission. So all they got to do is just knock it out of the guy's hands who's holding it, and you get it. You hold it for 3 turns, and all they have to do is just knock it out of your hand, and you're like, motherfucker.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think supplies have really changed since its inception. It's all
has the scoring changed significantly. I think.
I'm sure the scoring changed.
Oh yeah,
it's all about going and grabbing those boxes. So. Speed and smoke are pretty much king in this mission, and this is one of the few ones where if you're playing Ariadna and you've got your 19-point bike that you can run up, grab it, pull it back, and then spend the rest of your turn doing something else.
Cover, yeah.
Kev's favorite rule. Kev's favorite rule.
Yeah, you may as well just go first, grab an objective, and then try and lock down the other ones, and then just do the same thing the next turn.
Yeah, obviously your opponent's going to be. Yeah, obviously if you're playing against Ariadne or somewhere like that, you're going to expect them to just throw smoke and run with the motorbike. So you have to be pretty quick at disabling that, or at least making that difficult with either mines or MSV. But yeah, some factions are definitely very good at getting the objectives or making it hard for the opponent to get objectives. So I don't know, it's a great scenario. Yeah, I think
it is good. I think it really does. It brings into play a lot of choices, list choices, because you kind of want to, if you do go first, you want to be able to grab a box, but you also want to be able to at least push your opponent or keep your opponent boxed into the deployment zone if you can. Yeah. And if you can grab 2 supply boxes, that's even better. But often you don't have enough mobility, enough orders, enough guns to be able to do that in turn 1. But there are some armies, especially those armies with specialist bikes and access to smoke on those bikes as well, can do it. And it's amazing how much work like 5 orders in Combat Group 2 when you've got a specialist motorcycle can accomplish. It's scary because then you've still got like 8 orders to go and persecute an Alpha Strike or at least, you know, take a few orders off your opponent. But not every army is capable of doing that. I've noticed in my games of playing supplies. That's what I've noticed.
Yeah. Rob, any hot takes? Any first?
I think
first
what
or
Kev just
second?
mentioned is a good take. I don't have a particularly firm opinion on whether to go first or second in this one. I think it could go either way. But I do
Okay.
think you want to have a plan for if you are going to go first. If you're going second in supplies, you're pretty much just reacting to exploit whatever your opponent does. And because going first in supplies is a huge opportunity but hugely risky. Where if you don't touch the objectives at all, then and you just attack your opponent and they defend successfully, then for the rest of the game, all they got to do is just grab a little. They just got to take a little bit back from you, get a box, maybe 1 box back to the deployment zone. You're accruing a debt basically. Every box that you don't grab is something you got to account for later on with your order budget. But at the same time, if you don't step on your neck of your opponent on the first turn, if you're going first, then your opponent, if you just grab boxes, then your opponent's role to like exploit what you've done is like, cool, they have just survived a first turn in Infinity having taken no damage. That's the golden state. They're going to come and fuck you up over the next 3 turns.
Oh yeah.
And they will take those boxes off of your body. So Kev's approach I really like is if you're gonna build for this with a plan, they're like sort of probably the best general turn 1 plan is build a combat group 2 that can comfortably steal a box. Because that
You
frees
want at
up
least one.
combat group 1 to attack and pin your opponent in and do whatever it is you need to do. Probably my favorite overall piece for box stealing is Dr. Worm with a Wormbot. Because he's both super good at grabbing them and he's fast and he's cheap. And the Wormbots can pick, once he's opened a box, the Wormbots can grab the boxes from him. So he can feasibly get 2 boxes back in 1 run, if that makes sense. And get them back at least to your deployment where you can then hold the things and fight over them. But yeah, that's okay.
Sorry, I just had thought. Can the motorized 111 in like let's say what's the in
112.
Cosmo?
Dash out or Cosmo, or Dash out at least can have little servant bots and do that as well, which is quite nice, especially with smoke and 8-4 move.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think I personally the only. Oh, sorry, Jake, go.
No.
How do you do that is it's a short skill to pick a box up off of a trooper that is carrying it. So like a friendly can open the box and then as a short skill, you can take that box from them. And so if, for example, you have a doctor with a servant bot, you can move the doctor up alongside the servant bot, crack the box, and then as another skill, first short skill move, second short skill, servant bot pick the box up from the doctor. They have to have crossed paths, obviously, but yeah, totally doable.
I suppose the only thing to be, especially when we're talking about going first, is to be careful on deciding. Let's say you do what Kev was suggesting. Your second group successful, manages to get a box. You got to be aware that if you try and open up a second box, and your attack, like let's say you do it as you're attacking, and your attack doesn't go well, that every box you open is a short order and a potentially risky roll if they don't have the paramedic there. That they don't have to make. Anyone can pick up a box. It doesn't have to be the doctor. The doctor just has to get it out of the supply box. So as soon as you do that, if you're not in a good position to hold it, you are better off leaving it in there and at least wasting half an order.
Yeah, so your opponent has to bring a specialist rather than just any troop. So what you're saying is, if you get it out with your specialist and your specialist has the dick in the wind, you've basically done half the work for the opponent.
Yeah. So if let's say you've done, like I said, what Kevin said, second group's done its shit, come back, and you're working on your first group, and you're halfway through. Just be you got to be aware of the fact that touching and getting that box is probably just not worth your time. You're better off setting up to defend it.
Absolutely.
If you've got a link team that's on the way to your opponent's deployment zone, for example, probably don't pause to open a box with them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Speaking
about... Oh, sorry. Val? You have something?
Yeah, no, go on.
I was just speaking about extracting supply boxes. Something came up recently in a conversation because I was running the Maghreb guard who has baggage and the pilot's got paramedic. So I was trying to do something fun with that, but which it still works, but you just got to be mindful that when the tag pilot dismounts from the tag, it will take the box with her, and vice versa. If the tag pilot gets out to extract the box, it's obviously on her, and then when she gets back in the Maggie, then it's on the tag. But because the tag's got baggage, the tag can carry 2, but of course only the paramedic can carry 1 because it doesn't have baggage. Anyway, the point I was going to make was you can still extract a supply box if you're carrying a box.
It'll just go on the ground?
Pick it up automatically. It just like drops next to you.
Hmm.
So you can still extract it if you're carrying a box. You just don't automatically pick it up. As at least my reading of the rules of that skill.
Yes, very nice.
Nothing preventing you from, because it says if once this roll is successful, the tech coffin is removed. Blah blah blah. It says the supply box token must be placed beside it. So it says a whip roll to extract and pick up the supply box. So my reading is if you can't pick it up, you still extract it.
Yeah,
sure.
The other way to interpret it, which would be the same thing, is that if you're holding one already and you can only hold one and you successfully open a box to pick it up, you then drop the one you're already carrying, but it's the same ultimate effect.
Yeah, okay. No, that's actually probably a bit of a smoother way of reading it. Yeah, you just pick one up, drop the other. Which I guess just means, again, if you're going to do Rob's trick with the Dr. Worm can go all the live long day opening all the boxes, and the worms just kind of scutter behind and go, whoop, mine. You don't have to be too finicky with it. So with the Maghreb guard example is she can have one, have it on her, extract one, and then go back in the tag, and then the tag just picks up the second one because it's got baggage and can carry 2.
If you do drop it, and this is more of a question out of curiosity, does it just sort of count like a token, just like a tin bot does, that follows it around? When you drop it, do you get to choose where it goes in contact with your model? Because it's not important for an S2, but for a Maggie's big.
It doesn't.
If you put it on the opposite side.
So no. So just to clarify, the pickup supply box, you don't actually. If it's, let me just remind myself. If you drop the supply box, you are picking it up off the body, not off the token, is my understanding. So it doesn't matter where you put it down.
Oh well, yeah.
Because it says be in silhouette
But if you put it down and walk away,
if you're putting it down, you're not dead. Where does it?
And what if you die? Then you don't have a body.
No. Yeah. So if you die, it goes where your base was.
Right. So then it acts like transforming into a dog warrior. It just has to be within your base.
You can. I mean, reading the rules explains the rules. I think as well.
So we can probably look into this a little bit. Or people can look into that one a little bit because that's more finicky rather than how the actual mission plays.
It's an absolute edge case. So take that one
offline. No, it's not really absolute. It's not really absolute edge case. He's right. Like if you go down, then do you want to put then if it matters, do you put the token around the corner where you've just died, or do you put it? Obviously you want to put it around the corner where you've just fallen down. So if your opponent can, have to spend the extra inch to get around the corner, that's why it's important. If it matters where the token goes down. Because the controlling this, there was a bit in it. There was something in the rules that actually specifically said it.
Well, yeah, but
it must always be kept on the table. Yeah. The supply box token must always be kept on the table, even if the model which is carrying it passes to a null state. And then I can't remember. There was something about how it goes down. I'm sure there was something about this in the rules.
Because if the question is, if the Maggie's carrying it, the Maggie's base is this big, right? And the token is this big. The Maggie dies. Where within this circle does this circle land?
Yeah.
Well,
yes.
That one. If that's the case, if that's the way you put it down, then it would more than likely would follow the rules for like when you transform a dog face into a dog warrior, where the bases just have to be within each other. So the S2 base just has to be inside where the S6 appears.
Right.
Yeah, it
So
doesn't really.
they just have to be inside each other. There's a diagram for it.
It
pretty
just
much
says
like
it just
that, I
says
guess.
be in solid contact with an allied trooper and a normal. So if it's an allied trooper, you have to be in contact with the trooper, obviously, to pass the box across, not the token. So you can't cheat an inch by putting the token in front of your guy. It has to be in solid contact with your allied trooper. So I interpreted that as being also in contact with anything, but being solid contact with an unaccompanied supply box token. So I guess if you're null state, you're not. It's the supply box token is unaccompanied. So I guess there's no limitation as to where you can put that supply box token down when you go unconscious or go into a null state. So I guess, yeah, you can just put it wherever suits you. There's nothing stopping you from putting it wherever you want.
And
my reading of it.
if worst comes to worst, ask the TO.
Yeah, I mean, I really mentioned it because the Maggie is so massive.
Yeah. Makes sense.
That if you put it on the far side, that 2 inches could matter.
Yeah, exactly. You're basically extracting you're getting much closer to the other dudes. The only thing I'd say is with this mission is the one thing if you're going first, I basically you have to get at least one box. You have to give yourself some insurance in terms of scoring. The other thing is the 2 classifieds. You can score 2 classifieds before the game ends because everything else scores at the end of the game. The one thing is that you can guarantee getting points on the board is the classifieds.
That can quite often be the tiebreaker as well in this mission because often you'll have one box, they'll have one box, and maybe no one's got the third box, or maybe you've just only had enough orders to kill the third box carrier, and you're kind of at a draw, and you're like, oh fuck, what do I do? Oh, secure HVT, yay! That is, and because there's 2 of them up for grabs, it could be the difference between a draw and a loss, or a win and a loss at that point.
Yeah,
I suppose if you can't manage to attack really well on your first turn, but you can manage to do your your 2 classifieds, I'd probably say a box and 2 classifieds is a pretty good first turn, even if you don't hurt anybody.
Absolutely, I'd agree.
Yeah. Rob, I had a quick question for you regarding this mission. Just based off of the fourth bullet point in effects under extract supply boxes. It states if a scenery item is used instead of a token, then it can be kept on the game table.
Yep.
Now, I don't think anyone plays it that way, but what's your thoughts on it?
So the reason why nobody plays it this way is that you need a marker to represent that a model is carrying the supplies, and the objective is almost always that marker because players don't have with them the token specifically for playing supplies that they then leave them out anyway.
I do.
So,
but yeah,
you are unique. You're most certainly unique. It's actually one of the reasons why for this scenario I much prefer 2D. This is a scenario where I much prefer 2D markers. Because it's just so much more convenient to succeed the roll. Cool. Now you're just moving the objective with the thing. If you are playing, I guess this is advice to players. If you are playing on a scenario with 3-dimensional objectives, if you're playing on a table with 3-dimensional objectives, talk to your opponents about how to play that. Because if you both don't have a way to mark who's carrying the box, the only way to do it might be with the 3-dimensional objective that you're not supposed to move. If you do decide that you're going to pick up the 3-dimensional objectives and move them with troopers, for God's sake, don't pretend that they provide cover once you've opened the box.
I have heard this before. Yeah, you realize it's supposed to be a 25mm flat disc, but sure.
I would say that if I hadn't seen it.
Wait. Are you saying that somebody has said that the token that they're carting around with them provides cover?
Yes, I have seen that.
Yeah,
I've seen. Who the fuck said that?
A new player attempting to. That's a new player.
Canberra is closer to New South Wales than.
Okay. I'll give a grace. I'll give new player grace.
The game is hard.
We're not gonna dox people on this podcast. So calm down, Jake.
We're not gonna dox.
No. I thought it was like an argument where
I've never seen someone play it for advantage.
Yeah.
I've never seen someone play it for advantage, but I've seen someone be like, "How the fuck do we do this? Oh, this way, I guess." And then I walked over to the table and was like,
"Oh no,
no. What's cover? What are you doing?"
I thought it was like a forum argument of amongst, like,
no,
Americans or something. That's
No,
The reason
absolutely not.
why I ask is, like, again, it is a bit of a new player question because people have in the past played supplies where they've say there's been an air, like, we typically play 3D objectives here in Melbourne. We've got heaps of them and we mark them all as being S3. It's nice and easy. Everyone understands S3, and and they look good on the table. But when you come to play supplies, we've had players in the past who have snuck up to this objective. They've been prone, everything's going well, and then they pick up the box, and then that's when they realize that it gets taken away. And in their next order, they're standing in front of a fully linked sniper rifle, going, "Oh, I didn't know that thing disappeared." But this bullet point here does state you can keep
Just
it,
leave it.
but I don't think anyone's
leave it.
ever done it that way.
I would just leave it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say
If it's practical too, I would encourage players to follow that rule.
Yeah, I mean, like,
What rule?
Kev, if
keep
you're
it on the
playing the
table.
game and you say your opponent, "Hey, I've actually got markers for the supplies, so if you roll,
No.
I'll give you the mark."
Right, I can't hear what Rob said. Did he say leave it or take it away?
If there's three-dimensional objectives and the players can play with some other way of marking possession of supply boxes, yeah, leave the objectives there per the rules.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it just says it can be. So I think, I guess it's just have a conversation with your opponent before the start of the game. But I just would assume that the majority of players who play this mission have always just removed it from the table. That this was a bullet point I think I've never noticed before. And it was only after somebody queried about does it get removed or not, and I'm like, yeah, it gets removed. And then I read the rules. And I was like, actually, it doesn't have to be removed. That's interesting. And I just didn't know if anyone else had that situation come up, because it does change how the game is played. Like if you take the supply box out of the thingo and it doesn't go away, then you're not having to deal with the arrow piece that's staring at you. You know what I mean? Because you're behind the box, you can't see it.
If in doubt, you can always ask the TO. And also, speaking as someone who runs tournaments locally, if I've got access to three-dimensional objectives, how I set up the table will be with one of those two outcomes in mind. So if as a context clue, for example, if I have placed a bunch of scatter around some of the objectives, I'm probably expecting that the players will need to remove them. So there is other scatter there to facilitate play in that part of the table. If there's not, if the objective is like this big, tall console thing that is obviously part of the table, players can figure it out from there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So talk to your opponent, but don't assume that it goes away. But yeah, figure it out before the start of the game. I guess.
Okay. Well, we could probably move on to round 4 then, unless there was any final thoughts on supplies.
Yeah, just to jump in, sorry. The worst case scenario is one where you don't talk to your opponent about it, have different understandings,
Absolutely.
and then 60 minutes into the game, someone is like, that needs to be removed. And the other person is like, no, it explicitly doesn't. And you have to call a TO because someone's plan has been rooted.
Yeah. And especially that little can statement can really make that situation crop up.
Which means at the start, before you start the game, you have to say to your opponent, "Hey, these things that are on the table, when we open them, are we taking them off or not?" You just have to leave it to the player.
Yeah, you can let the players decide as they do it. So if you open it, you can choose to leave it.
Absolutely fucking not.
No.
What do you mean?
No, you can't choose the way you want to do it at the time that you're doing it. You have to make a ruling before the game starts which way it's going to go.
And one of the rulings can be that you and your opponent can agree to that. Whoever
I disagree. I disagree.
I would advise against that, but if you can find an opponent who agrees to it, fill your boots.
Are you saying like as in like Aval, are you saying that like at the beginning of the game you could you just let it go on a game by game basis, but at the beginning of the game? Or when they actually press the button?
You saying
let's just move on to supremacy. It's not really all that important.
Okay. Let's move on. Supremacy. Supremacy is another classic game of Infinity that I'm sure we've all played many times. 12-inch deployment zones, and then the mid zone between the two deployment zones is broken up into 4 quadrants. In the center of each of those quadrants is a console. So your objective is to hold Push those 4 buttons, or up to 3 of them for points, and then also to hold those quadrants each round to get points for holding those quadrants. So in terms of the specifics on the points there, at the end of each game round, dominate more quadrants than the opponent is 2 objective points. At the end of the game round, dominate the same number of quadrants as the adversary is 1 objective point, but only if at least 1 quadrant is dominated by each player. At the end of the game, have a hacked console, 1 objective point for each console, up to a maximum of 3 objective points, and there's 1 classified objective. So counter to acquisition, which we spoke about before, where it's scored at the end of the game, supremacy is scored each round, apart from for the domination. The what's it called? The consoles are scored at the end of the game, but the domination component each round, which is big. Baggage as well is an important rule to factor in for this one, because it adds an additional 20 VP for the dominating the zone that you're in. And is there a hacker bonus as well? Yeah, hacker bonus. No gravity zones. Again, man, you're hamming up these no gravity zones, CanCon. Oh wait, no, this is a different one. This is a different one. This is the sorry. I've made the classic the blunder of mixing up no gravity with low gravity. Sorry. So no gravity zone is where if you've got terrain total or terrain 0G or super jump, you get +1 inch to your first movement value. Only during the move skill. Kev, I wanted to point that one out just for you, Kev.
Thank you.
There's
that shouldn't be there, but I guess it's there to stop you from. I don't know why they added that bit in there, because it wasn't there for last season. I'm not quite. I guess they just wanted to screw over super jump, but then they made it better, so I guess it's doesn't matter.
And then we've got the security detachment sec det CSU for free, which is cool. And look, Intelcom card provisions. The classified objective symbol with something gives 1 extra objective bonus point with the globe, but only if you have less than 10. So there's some objectives, some classifieds are worth 2 for some reason.
Those ones tend to be the ones that are hacking ones. I think the only one that it crosses with like a different one is, I think, mapping, which can be done by forward observer.
Just on zero gravity, happy to be corrected on this, but when it says only during a move skill, I believe that is referring to skills with the movement tag, which includes climbing plus, and is just sort of like, I think that's meant to be guys don't apply this during dodges and guts rolls, but on the other hand, it mentions their move value, so I don't know how else you would apply it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's because it's like an M move with a capital M, which is a move skill, which obviously move climbing plus.
No, fair enough.
Yeah, but and I don't.
It says it's a move skill, not skills with the movement tag.
Oh yeah, no, move is a defined skill. Disregard. Yeah. So it doesn't work on super jump.
Yes, which is kind of why people are like, but you've made the season good for super jumpers, but they can't use it, which is sad. But hey ho.
It should say the move skill, but
I would prefer that.
Yes, that would have been better terminology.
Right. I mean, yeah, you could argue because it says move skill, but no, because it's movement's the tag, isn't it?
Yeah, it's move versus movement tag. Move skill.
No, you're right.
Tag.
Yeah.
Cool. What do we think? First off, are we going first? Are we going second? I'm going second, if I can.
I will never voluntarily choose to go second, but this is a scenario that I will almost always pick deployment in if given the option.
Yes. Yeah, this one.
Not that big brain.
So hard. This one's so hard to go first. Jesus.
Especially on the first game of day 2. You're probably not quite awake yet either.
How would you go first in this mission if you had to? You just rampage, pushing all 3 buttons, and then.
I will make an attack that carries heavy assets into my opponent's half of the table and attempts to pin them into the deployment zone while following up with a couple of like super light pieces into my two zones.
If you can stick a
Turn
whole
one.
bunch of points into the 2 quadrants that are just outside of their deployment zone, then sure, you might not necessarily be scoring because I mean, like, yeah, it's gonna make it hard for them to get those if you've got a heap of points in there straight up.
I don't love doing it, but
I
if you're going first, it's the way to play it.
I
With
think
some
Griffin?
factions anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
I think, and this is the problem I have with this one, and is Quadra Control if it's scored the same at the end of as the end round ones with yeah. So just this one is if you've got a competent opponent, it's going to be difficult to really push into their deployment zone without the risk of them running around and grabbing your deployment zones. If I feel like if I go first in this, I'm just going to give up the 1 point or 2 points for having more deployment zones in the first turn.
They play it safe.
And yeah, it's only one. It's only one.
You get 2 for dominating more. You get 1 for dominating the same amount. So I think
Yeah.
this mission often plays out as a bit of a delicate dance for the first 2
Yeah,
rounds.
it really
If
does.
neither of you can get the upper hand, you both get 1 point in turn 1. You both get 1 point in turn 2, and then turn 3 is when someone's bloodied enough that they can't hold both zones, or they go for an overreach, and then that's where you often capitalize, and then it's down to who's gotten the most consoles. That's how it's often been played, at least when I played it, especially against good opponents.
An important thing to remember, though, as well, is when you are pushing forwards, is don't forget about the zones that are just outside your deployment zone. Like, you don't want to throw everything forward at the detriment of holding your own half of the table sides, which I know I've definitely done, and it's ended up that I've not had enough points in, like, I've been in the front, like the advanced left quadrant, but I've taken the rear right quadrant, and then like with like no orders left in my pool, I'm like, oh shit, I moved everything out of my one of my own quadrants to advance, and kind of shot myself in the foot.
Yeah, if you overspend on your alpha strike and then you realize too late and you only like leave one model in like either your zones, it makes it really easy for the opponent simply to take that model out, take that zone away from you, and then all of a sudden they're in real strong control of how the zones are designated at the end of the turn.
If you are planning on either it's your plan or it's your backup to go first and push aggressively in supremacy, one of the things I would think is important for army mix is good hard AROs, because if you are aggressively attacking up close and can deploy with pieces that bracket your opponent, at that point, provided you don't, if you crack your knuckles attacking them, you've lost the game. But nature of the beast. But if you are in a position where you do damage, hem them in close, and hem them in at range, that's the point at which, assuming that you've inflicted 3 or 4 troopers worth of casualties onto your opponent, or more ideally, that's the point at which if they have to spend the orders to lay smoke or white noise or cautious move or engage hard ARO pieces and deal with the things you put up close. I've had games, not with every faction, you cannot do it. Like with Hack Islam, very, very difficult. With Combined Army, depends on your list. With Toha, surprisingly doable because you can sort of just deploy pieces like Nichols and anything with a Symbiomate as an ARO element. It's surprisingly easy to end up with like just one piece that your opponent couldn't kill and can't contest in one of their quadrants. Say an Anathematic is a perfect case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very nice.
I mean,
very nice.
Sitting in camo is one of the
Huge.
few where I've never done it because I'm a big bitch baby boy, but infiltrating and trying to put some points early, like in the deployment phase, into your
over infiltrate.
Yeah,
roll
exactly.
the dice.
Or I suppose at the very least get on the line if you can. Like, if there's a building that's cut in half and you can go over into theirs, is always worth it to force your opponent who's going second to stay back and keep points back. But I don't think every time I've gone first in this mission, I think every single time I've probably gone, I'll hopefully, once they're out of their big defensive position in their deployment zone, I can crack whatever they've got turn 2, and then hopefully turn 2 I'll get that 2 points, and then turn 3 I'll get the 2 points because it's snowballed from there. But I think I would always plan to just touch my, like, if I'm going first, I would plan to touch the 2 buttons, secure my zone, and if everything went really well, or you see a really obvious weakness in your opponent, then maybe try and take one of their zones and leave a little less than one of yours.
It's actually, there's some
Yeah.
interesting stuff that can I just touch on for a second?
Yeah, go for it.
Really good point about having pieces that can start in zones. Any piece that you've got, if you're list building for supremacy, any piece that you have that alleviates the need to move troops into a zone is just super. You're just banking that value, right? Even if it's just like an infiltrating grunt or whatever, something that you guarantees you have some points in a zone, because it is super easy if you haven't built a list for supremacy to have a situation where you just forgot, you just didn't have enough orders to move one piece
Yeah.
into one zone and you're down 2 points. Because if your opponent only has to score their 2 zones to score 2 points because you haven't contested one of yours,
So
you're
easy.
so far behind.
Yeah.
The second thing is, actually just generally, I don't disagree with that as an approach. Supremacy going first is one of the hardest scenarios to major. I think it's very, if you're a good player playing against an opponent that you may be a little bit better than, or you're lucky or whatever, going first with supremacy, I think you're in a good position to score a minor, but is really hard to major. And if you want to major, the only way to do it is to play super aggressively, because and you're gambling a lot if you do that, right? So if your approach is fuck this, no, I'm going to win first and try and major second, a conservative first turn is totally fine.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Because
you-
that approach of going hard into your opponent's hard over the halfway line and make your opponent deal with it is the fact that you can win or lose the game in turn 1 effectively. Because if you don't do enough damage, or you don't set up your pieces that you've carried over into their zones well enough that the opponent deals with them quickly, you're in real strife.
Yeah, any big alpha strike carries with it the risk of overextending, losing pieces, and losing the game.
And I think this is one scenario where, if I had it, if you're playing the right faction, if you've got a good, like, really strong, and potentially really expensive combat drop troop that you can put in their deployment zone and use it to mess them up.
Yeah.
I'd do it. I mean, I can't think of one off the top. What's a good heavy infantry you can drop in?
I mean, I think that
Actually,
this-
one of Nick's favorites, Tiger Soldier.
sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think using a drop troop to swing 2 points, even sacrificing a drop troop, just to swing end of round in your favor as if you're going second, I think it's almost worth it.
Yeah, I think that the list building for this mission shares a lot with supplies, right? You want forward deploying specialists, right, for button pushing and dominating, and also picking up the box in supplies. You also might value AD because it allows you to walk on and dominate a zone from an area that they weren't expecting, but also utilize an AD trooper to put down a box carrier. And as Rob said, like, if you've got access to even just cheap forward deploying elements, vanilla armies have like Libertos, except for Pano, and Krakots, which all start outside your DZ. They're not worth much, but they're points in the zone that you don't need to spend orders on, and they all work for supplies. So, and I think what else, like probably acquisition, I guess. But yeah, that's the sort of things I'd be valuing. And like you say, yeah, drop troop's great, and even if it's an expensive one, even better.
And one other thing, because we were sort of talking about Haq Islam before, just reminded me, is that maybe potentially a bit counterintuitively, impersonation.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Troops not only worth, like, obviously taking. I mean, impersonation is always worth taking, but in the case of a speculo, where normally they kind of, you throw them at a really high value piece, they die, you go off and do something else. They're probably worth, in this case, keeping them alive and just having them sit on a rooftop. They're valuable for throwing smoke to allow your guys to move up, and they're pretty expensive. I mean, it's the expensive part that's important there, because you can put, like,
a decent chunk of points in one of your opponent's side halves if it's an impersonation. So it's really hard to kill if you don't reveal it yourself. If it's in a difficult spot to take or to get to, that's even better. And then so it kind of forces your opponent's hand to counter that somehow.
Assassins can put almost 90 points in a zone.
Yeah, if you're
Yeah,
nuts,
exactly.
you can do, what is it?
I mean,
yeah,
I mean
90
that's
points,
that's what I was doing when I played Chaz. If I was playing Supremacy and I, ended up going second, I was like, well, cool. I've got 2 speculos. None of them are going to be able to do much on the first turn because I'm not going first. So put 2 of them in one zone, and now your opponent has to deal with them or readjust where they're putting their stuff to outpoint that, like you say, like 70 odd or 60, almost 70 points.
Yeah,
and it's potentially to be potentially 6 orders to get rid of 2 of them.
Oh yeah, it's an absolute order sink for them on turn 1, and it's just a good insurance against getting, or not insurance, but yeah, it just makes your opponent's life a little bit harder. So impersonation in this mission's really good. Fidesz, Jan Star, the Khitan imposters, they're not as expensive as a speculo, but like putting, having like 25 plus points in a zone that your opponent, that you have done nothing, like you've not spent any orders in that thing, and your opponent now has to spend orders to outpoint it is really good, especially if your opponent is going first and is going for the strong alpha. They now have to consider that they've got a 30-point model in their zone that they have to make sure that they put a baggage bot in there, plus like a mook, in order to make sure that they hold it.
Yeah. Honestly, I think that would shut down anyone who wants to do like a really aggressive push, take my opponent's sides, because that's so many points sitting in your zone. You can't push out.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have 60 points less when defending your troops.
Yeah, it's a consideration that is that can pay off.
As Vasti generally are a nightmare to play against in this scenario. 2 speculos, good camouflage troops, and then the whole bloody army has to be killed all the way to dead to stop scoring points.
Yeah.
So frustrating.
Yeah, that's right. If you want to win Supremacy, pay shows Vasti.
Yep.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Well, any final thoughts then, Rob, on Supremacy before we move on to round 5?
For this one, no. I think we've covered the gist.
Perfect. So
Actually, I had one more.
Sorry.
Yes,
one.
Kev,
go.
Just about the sec debt,
I
because it's free this mission.
I didn't ask you, Kev. I asked Rob.
Sorry, I was going to say the same thing.
No, go.
Just about the poor sec debt, because we mentioned them in the last mission there. Like that is, you can just pretty carefree spend its own order just to walk into your zone. It's not as expensive as their normal CSUs. I think they're like 13 points. That's nothing. That's not bad.
The most expensive
even
one's 11.
11, right? Okay, so it's 11 points you can just spend its own order on to walk into a zone, or to put into suppressive fire, which makes your opponent's life just a little bit harder, and you don't really care if it dies. So it's good. It's good in this mission to have.
I mean, it's worth it just to have the 11 points in a zone.
So we mentioned with Bashi Bazooks there was a bit of a choice between which profiles to take. I think with the CSU it's always Breaker Combi and Impulse.
That's exactly what I was just about to say, right? There's one profile here that we want, which is the Breaker Combi Rifle, Nano plus 1 burst. It's the most expensive one as well, which is, I mean, most expensive, not saying much. It's worth 11 points, but you get it from free. And none of the other ones really have anything on them that is drawing my eyes away from that profile.
Nick, you could choose to voluntarily trade your Breaker Combi Rifle for a Breaker Rifle.
I could, and lose my +3 from 0 to 8. That's the ultimate big brain play. What's that?
I think back in N2 you could turn a Breaker Combi off with a jammer. I think that was the thing, right?
In N2, okay, that's before my time. So
yeah, that was why rifles were there, because they couldn't be turned off by hacking and jamming.
Oh Jesus! Okay.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
It was a different time.
I'm a bit
different time.
Yeah, this is. Let's not start reflecting on N2 nostalgia, please.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a cool little rule, though.
No,
like
it's
that one.
Don't.
Very-
All right,
All right.
cool. Well, look, round 5, cryogenics. I know so little about this mission that I hadn't even said the name correctly until just now.
Well done.
I was calling it cryogenetics, which is not correct. But someone else is going to have to go through this one because, like I said before, I've still yet to my shame, I'm still yet to play this mission, and I don't know how it works. So somebody
Oh,
else take it away.
Rob, you want to take it
Rob?
away? Seeing as
Yeah, all right.
you-
Okay, table setup. Just like Supremacy, there are 4 objectives. These are tech coffins. Over the course of the game, you will be activating these tech coffins. Unlike Supremacy, each player can only activate each once. And once they are activated, they are removed. When you remove a tech coffin, you roll a dice to see if it contains a HVT. I want to say it's a 13 to 20. It contains a HVT. Maybe it's a 14 to 20. Consult the scenario. Otherwise, most of the time, it does not. So the first one that you open that has a HVT in it is your HVT. The second one that you open is your opponent's HVT. You can only place 2 HVTs. Does this sound complicated? It is.
Well,
You are trying to press these.
Just before you go into it any further, right? My
Yeah.
main takeaway, just looking at the ITS document, every single mission is 2 pages. Cryogenics is 3 full pages.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on here.
So there are four consoles with HVTs inside them, and as you open those consoles, they disappear and HVTs appear. The ones that you open first are less likely to have HVTs in them, but they could. So there's an element of randomness. Once the
Schrodinger's.
HVTs appear, they set the conditions for scoring later in the game. There is also 2 objective points for having activated 2 or more tech coffins, which means that if you press 3, you lock your opponent out of those points, but obviously you've had to have spent the orders to have pressed 3. So that's part 1. Part 2 is you have to elect a master breacher. Over all 3 rounds of the game, you are attempting to dominate quadrants have a dominant master breacher, which means have a master breacher in a quadrant that you are dominating. This is totally disconnected to the entire rest of the mission. There are 4 quadrants, just like in Supremacy, and you want to have your master breacher in the one of them, close to your deployment zone usually, that you are dominating from turn 1 onwards. 3 objective points that way. That's really easy to miss or forget. That's going to often decide the game. Get your master breacher into a safe place in a quadrant that you can control. Finally, at the end of the game, you are interested in only those quadrants that have HVTs. You are at that point trying to dominate each of those 2 quadrants. There can only be 2 because there's only 2 HVTs, and there might only be 1 because some fuckhead could pick up a HVT and move it into the same quadrant as another one. In which case, there are fewer points on the line. If you can't dominate, and this is the biggest point of confusion typically, if you don't dominate those quadrants, then for each quadrant that you don't dominate, you can score consolation prizes by threatening the HVT in that quadrant. You threaten a HVT by being in its zone of control, with an extra point for threatening with your master breacher. Remembering that your master breacher probably has to be sitting in a zone somewhere, scoring points because they're worth points in zones until the very end of the game. So part 1, opening those consoles. Part 2, scoring with your master breacher throughout the course of the game. And then part 3, the rush for the HVTs at the very end. In addition, there's 1 classified objective. I think in the cutout that Nick's got, it says it's worth 2 objective points. I would need to do math on whether that's the case. You can only score 10 in this scenario.
Yeah, it's worth. I think they've corrected that.
Yeah, that might be an older document. So it's 2 points for more tech coffins, up to 5 points for dominating with HVT the entire game, up to 9 points for the 2 HVT quadrants at the end of the game. Yeah, one classified objective worth 1 point. It's a typo in our show notes.
Yeah, yeah. They correct the document, but I think if you check the forums, there's a mess LOEs
So
or
I've-
something like that.
classified worth 1.
So sorry,
Yeah.
I've got the ITS document open. It does say 2 objective points. Is that
And then it's wrong.
okay?
It's wrong. Yeah,
Okay.
it's definitely just.
Okay. Thanks for running us through that, Rob. That was a really great job. I still have no idea what the fuck's going on.
It's one of those missions where if you're playing it to a new player and they're getting confused, but you know how to play it, you're sitting there going, no, it makes sense. You just have to play it a couple of
I
times.
feel like it's the kind of
say.
mission where if your opponent's getting confused, you just got to go over and give them a hug because you're having a hard time as well, right?
We're both confused.
This is a little bit of an indictment on its design. I like this scenario having played it, but I would say it makes sense the second or third time you play it, which is not ideal.
So the biggest takeaway that our listeners can get is if you want to play this mission, make sure you've had a few goes at it before you turn up,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Definitely.
It is weird because this is about the mission where it seems really complicated, and it is. But once you actually get a handle of it, for whatever reason, it's a really fun scenario. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's a great scenario.
Yeah, I mean, it can be complicated and fun at the same time. There's just a lot of levers to pull in this mission, which I think is something that people in the community have been calling for a bit, like just having missions which have multiple to win. And I think this mission to me gives people lots of options between the dominant master breacher, from how you push the buttons and where the HVTs pop out, to threatening them, or to dominating them. There's lots of ways to get points. I mean, it's not necessarily going to win, but it's games I've played have quite often been very close. They've been like 6-4 or 6-5 or something like that. So from that point of view, it's a fun mission because it often feels quite close, providing you're not getting curb stomped on turn one.
Yeah.
I think a bit of commentary on this one is within a week of this scenario being released alongside the pack, I think I saw 4 or 5 different people online, each with absolute certainty claim they had cracked the code and had the single best way to play the mission, and each of them had wildly different opinions on what that was.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. I really like that from that point of view.
Wow. If anyone ever played,
It's good that they're all different. So obviously none of them have cracked the code.
Yeah.
So the mission
if
stands up.
anyone plays me and doesn't like the way I play it, blame Kev because I just followed what he.
Yeah,
told me.
the what I heard at the beginning of how to play this mission the best was to first turn push 3 of the buttons, because by pushing 3 of the buttons, you are revealing at least one of the HVTs and locking your opponent out of 2 points. I think it was, which I don't know. Like, it seems like it's like talking about supplies. If you're going to spend your entire first turn pushing 3 buttons, then what else are you doing? But I guess it depends on the faction. I don't know if that's still how people look at this mission, but that was how it was communicated to me at the start.
Yeah, I don't mind that as an approach, but it is super all in because if you spend all of that effort spending 2 buttons and going for a third, and your opponent or the dice stall you out on that third objective, then you have potentially spent your entire first turn not killing your opponent and setting them up for control potentially over where the HVTs are. Like it's a risky but interesting play. It's not necessarily the single best way to play it in every scenario.
Yeah, because for context of people about the scoring again, it's at the end of the game have activated 2 or more tech coffins. So if you activate 2, then you get 2 points. If you activate 3, you still get 2 points. But the difference is if you activate 3, your opponent can't activate 2, so therefore they're locked out of 2. Which is a good thing to start off the game with, right? But like you say, Rob, yeah, if you don't get that done, then you could be in a bit of strife.
I do think. Oh, sorry, go.
Sorry, go on. I was just gonna say around the master breaches. Do you guys want to have a discussion around what sort of models you'd pick for a master breacher? And I guess the follow up was how important would you guys place the assassination of your opponent's master breacher in the way you approach the mission?
I mean,
Anna, Jacob, go.
It always depends on what the opponent's master breacher is. I mean, it can be a tag.
Yes.
So let's see what it can't be. So what it can't be is it cannot be a marker. So it has to be always on the game table. It also cannot be a regular, and it cannot be a remote. So it can be a tag, but it has to be on the table, and it can't be under a marker state, which is important.
I mean, look, if I think I can kill it and not spend like a ridiculous amount of points on it, sure. But if someone rocks up and says, "Hey, here's my avatar, here's my master breacher," I might consider concentrating on other things and killing them if I have the opportunity, and less so than focusing on it. But I mean, if you can do it, you can take out. Oh man,
3 points.
almost all.
3 points is
Yeah,
huge.
potentially
massive.
5.
Because you can
Potentially
take.
5, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because you get the end of the game 2.
And
And
one every
so-
turn.
So when
So,
I
whatever.
first time I
5.
played Cryogenics, I looked at the bonuses and I gave Terrain Zero G and D charges to an Asawira. And that felt super cool and also was the wrong thing to do. The more I've played the scenario, the more I'm of the opinion that the most important thing a Master Breacher needs to do is inconspicuously survive in a zone for 3 rounds. Which means they need to be tough enough to be difficult, tough enough to be annoying to kill, but cheap enough that you don't want to go after them with tons of resources if it's avoidable. So something like a tag, tags are hard to hide, can be possessed. It's worth your time killing a tag, but maybe the tag is your best choice in a list. Something like it's hard to find in some factions a really good Master Breacher.
Breacher. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, a relatively expensive 2-wound model, perhaps.
Can you give some examples of things that you think would be good in factions that you do play, Rob?
So in Toha, I haven't minded making a tack wheel officer my Master Breacher because it can defend itself in zone of control because it can both smoke and attack in zone of control when things coming after it. If it's the LT, it can move into the zone by itself, and it's frustratingly difficult to kill and has regeneration. In combined army, I'm honestly still not sure. Actually, because I don't want to make it like my anathematic starts in Marker State. I probably, in my anathematic Chironted list, I would make it the Chironted. Because it can get into a zone and it doesn't want to be on Overwatch, it wants to be hunkered down and it's hard to kill.
Is the Chironted your
Chironted
LT?
Chironted HMG LT anathematic is by itself.
Yeah.
I suppose at least then you've got the anathematic distracting.
Yeah, people usually have to pick one, and you're trying to pin them in with hacking, not with arrows and with warbands. In Hackislam is where I've had the hardest time, because in Hackislam, a lot of the pieces that I would comfortably leave in one of those close zones are like single wound pieces. Like I've had a Hassassin Bereed at one point just because after we deployed, most of my opponent's force was in one place, and like I was spread a little bit more out, and I figured I could just leave this Bereed in a zone for 3 turns, and that ended up being true. But in other cases, like a Mukhtar starts in a zone and can hang out there, but then I don't want a Mukhtar to be passive the entire game. The second that you start aggressively taking gunfights with your Master Breacher, and if you it's so difficult to risk doing that.
Yeah.
In Vanilla Aleph, the cheapest for deploying post-human is an easy pick. Chuck him in a zone and leave him there the entire time.
I mean, I was thinking either him or if you've got the doctor, hacker engineer one, because then you can just slap bots with it. It can still do its job, be safe. It's got no wounding cap and mimetism, I think.
The other super big brain play in combined army, now that I'm thinking about it, is I haven't done this yet, but I did mean to do it. Is if you airdrop an Imatron into a zone in a really hard to reach place, I might genuinely make my Imatron a Master Breacher.
Wait, are Imatrons Rams?
I don't believe so.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think they're light infantry
or equipment or some shit.
It's light infantry support troop.
Jeez.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, yeah, all right, I'll give it.
Yeah, having your Master Breacher as a HMG platform that doesn't need to push out of your zone to gunfight, I think, well, like you said with the Corontas, I think that's a legit pick. And I think most factions get
didn't have a lieutenant order to move into a zone with, I'd be much more reluctant to pick it. But it's unlike most tough lieutenant pieces. It's low risk because if it does die, it's not going to die easy. It's very hard to kill, and I'm not. It just jumped. It memnon-makers into something. I don't lose everything.
Exactly. Just going back to Hack-Islam. What about the? I know it's squishy, but you can get some use of it more than just sitting in a zone. What about the NCO Gulam?
Play Saladin a lot, so NCO is not a useful skill, but otherwise, yes.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, gotcha. I'm trying to think because I think for Ariadna, because a lot of your really good pieces, like survivable pieces, are also sort of your attack pieces. You don't want to leave them behind. You might have to do that sort of. It's just a dude in the back. might be a good reason to take what's his face, Veronin.
Between
It's
he's
a
quite
chunk.
big though. He's quite big. It's
Well,
quite easy to get
but
to.
he's going to be purely there to hide on a rooftop.
Just an
and,
infiltrating grunt on a rooftop, prone. Fucking
Yeah,
done.
that's nice.
that's actually, yeah, that's
Between
not bad, actually.
cryogenics and supplies, both missions kind of reward you having assassin pace, which can either go after the enemy's box carrier, or I guess in this case, go after their master breacher. From a list design perspective, that's something I've just kind of clued on to. That might be worth considering.
Here's an interesting thought then. For this list or this mission, would you be more inclined to take a list that you would be using for supplies or the one for supremacy?
Supplies,
Yeah.
Supplies, why?
specialist bonuses.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because this one's got the same specialist bonuses, and it's really important that you get that you are efficient with opening those tech coffins.
Because you have to cover so much ground.
Yeah, especially if you're trying to do a lot of them in the first turn, then you really want to lean on those bonuses, right?
Mm.
I just want to go back because I just had a thought of Ariadna Master Breacher, the Antipode or Bearpode or the Bearpode controller. So
Oh,
the controller.
I would be super real. I get it, but it's such a high value, low toughness pace.
Yeah.
But if you like, I know what you're saying, but if you're especially if you go first, you could shove the dogs or the Bearpode in their face, and then they're gonna take. It's the same thing as like your anathematic.
The Bearpode controller is just a 6-point light infantry. You don't ever really. It doesn't do anything. It's not special. Whereas the Antipode controller has tack aware and controls the dogs as peripherals, so she can get herself into the zone.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay.
But a regular bear is a valid Master Breacher choice. And by the way, giving those things decharges is not a bad call.
Ooh, actually, yeah, and often that regular
often
it does kind of tend to sit as a bit of a backup piece. It's not there necessarily to correct me if I'm wrong, but it's often the irregular bear that goes off and does the killing, and the regular one kind of sits back and guards corners and eats things in the midfield if it gets the opportunity.
Yep, and maybe attacks late in the game, and I think it's a reasonable compromise. I've actually seen that. I've seen that used once, and if I hadn't been basically, I got very lucky to pin it back. This is a scenario, just to rear the specter of guided missiles briefly, where that kind of capability, right? The ability to signal one thing out and destroy it is very useful. If it's an assassin piece, if it's a missile strike, and just good luck killing a Bearpode efficiently with missiles.
Yeah, very good point.
They got total immune, don't they?
Total immunity, dodge on 16s, armor 5, and your opponent, if they need to, if it's late in the game, late in the turn, can just elect not to use dogged and their Fizz 16 for a paramedic to bring back.
Yeah. And then they can just shrug off the first one. They just go, "I'll reset on the first time you hit me."
Yep, reset on 9.
Do you stay targeted when you're unconscious?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can just bomb their body one more time.
A Bearpode might just shrug 5 missiles.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
you get defensive turrets in this as well, by the way.
Yeah. Do you?
You get defensive turrets.
It's on page 3. Shit, we forgot. We didn't keep scrolling.
Yeah.
There's also the 4th scenario with a bonus for terrain, right?
Yes, you get no gravity zone.
Plus 1 movement skill, yeah. Plus 1 movement, yeah.
Same as the
this is the only one with the F13 turret. I do love the F13 turret. Now with extra length, it's now S2 in this season. So bear that in mind, folks. For those of I had a game the other week where he was like, "I hate these turrets because they're only S1. They can never see over these parapets that I've got on my table." I'm like, "Haha, they're now S2," and he was like, "My goodness."
Yeah, back on that Bearpode as the as the Master Breacher, it gets 0G, so it's faster.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, you're right.
I used my Shen as a Master Breacher in this one. He was my lieutenant and Master Breacher. It was just like putting all your eggs in the one basket.
Yeah.
It wasn't great.
Like if someone plays
he's great, obviously. But,
someone plays an avatar in the scenario and they name it as the Master Breacher, you're basically, the game is, can you kill an avatar? And actually these days, without remote presence on the avatar, so you can't reroll engineering rolls, that becomes literally the whole game, is you just try and chip damage the avatar to death over the course of the game.
Kev asked this question, I think, a while ago, just when we were talking about this scenario, is if you do go first, what order do you want to press the buttons or the tech coffins in? Because obviously it's
Oh,
it's
tricky.
not you don't have a huge chance to get well, you get a decent chance, but not a huge chance, or it's less likely that you'll get your HVT with the first 2 buttons.
Yeah.
So
There's-
potentially you could press your opponent's 2 buttons, and I know you're going to
No.
disagree.
Don't fucking do it.
Yeah.
People like that, no.
No.
It's a win.
If you can, the best, I would say probably the most optimal way to play the first turn is as part of an attack across towards your opponent's side of the table, press 2 buttons on your way to the opponent. That
Yeah.
presses one on your side, one on their side, and what it does mean is it puts you in a position where they now have 2 buttons they can press in the same situation, and one of them is easy for you to defend. So you can press 2 buttons and then focus on defending the one that is close to you, and give yourself the best chance at low cost to score those 2 points that your opponent can't.
And it possibly also sets up the line the line of the line of scrimmage because if you do the first one you boop is not, and then the second one you boop is, and it's both on the same flank, then you can kind of start to imagine where you might have to go for the next 2. It's on the other side of the table. It's not like you know now. You can kind of you split the table in half either way. And then it kind of for the next 2 turns you kind of know where you might want to fight, because you don't care about that HVT if you reveal one until turn 3 anyway.
And probably an important thing to go over for this particular mission, because it's pretty relevant, is Civivac.
Yes, backing the HVT to a different
Because it's-
zone. I haven't done that, to be honest. In this mission, I've done that in a lot of other missions, but yeah, I think that's viable.
Yeah. Well,
I haven't tried it yet, but I think if you have enough orders left to pull off some play by civivacking a civilian, you were probably either it was your last ditch attempt or you were going to win anyway. But it is something you can do.
Yeah,
well, I mean, I think
They have made it
What was it? I
easier
think-
to civivac things in this season as well,
have,
right?
thank God.
So
I think it's been easy as whatever.
no, this
yeah, 'cause
this season
This season.
What did they do this season?
it doesn't have a move value; it just comes with you.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
right, yeah, yes, right, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, look, it's worth it if you got the half order to roll at the +3.
I would be most likely to consider it if I had gotten ahead on scenario. Like, say I'd opened 3 buttons and killed my opponent's Master Breacher early in the game, so I had a lead. I'd strongly consider it then by just like pulling 2 HVTs into the same quadrant, because that reduces the amount of points left on the table, and so you're more likely to win.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, and actually, that's just something about that, Rob. You just sparked my memory. There is sometimes it's not always a good idea to push all the buttons. If it's turn 3 and you've only pushed 1 button, or if you know there's 1 HVT left to reveal, but you can't be certain that you're going to dominate it, don't get out of the box, because your opponent might just be able to take that from you anyway. So just reduce the overall objectives that are available and push on, trying to push them off the one that is revealed.
Right, so if it's like turn 2 and you happen to have a HVT and like close to you, and it's too hard yakka to go and reveal the other HVT, just concentrate on dominating that zone.
Yeah, well, so an example that came up in a game against I think it was ALF or something like that, and there was one on his side of the table, and then the other one we'd already opened all the other 3, which meant that the one on my side of the table was definitely there, but it was on the same side of the table as flank of the table, I guess, as the one he just revealed, and he had the last turn. So I was going to my last turn going, oh, if I open this box, then I can potentially dominate this guy. But he's got the last turn, so it's every possibility that he'll just dominate it from me and get even more points. So I decided not to push the button and try and persecute an attack into his quadrant to try and kill his Master Breacher. It didn't work, but in my head I was like, well, the points are not in my favor here, so I might as well try to attack rather than push another button.
That's a fair play to recover the game.
Yeah, because I pushed one button. Actually, no, I think I pushed two buttons, and he'd only pushed one. So he would have to push this last button in order to get the 2 points. But because it contained a HVT that I wouldn't be able to hold, and he then had to push that button in his last turn, which he couldn't do. So it's just it's interesting the way the scoring goes on this mission.
And I think all this sort of thinking is why the scenario, as complicated as it is, has sort of become a favorite, is that it has all these considerations and all these interesting, not necessarily edge cases, that make it just an interesting round to play.
Easy.
Cool.
All right.
Well, I think that probably wraps it up in terms of the individual missions to go through. I know we have been going for a little while now, so I don't want to drag on for too much longer. But maybe just do a bit of a circle back to some of the thoughts we had initially. See if anything's changed once we've taken our deep dive and what. Oh, here's a good question that we haven't covered. Looking at the 5 missions, you bringing 2 army lists along. Is there a specific way that you guys are splitting these up? For me, personally, I mean, obviously, you've got the ones that have hacker bonuses and the ones that have paramedic or doctor bonuses. I think those are the main defining points of the difference in these missions. Yeah, you've got unmasking, which has got the exclusion zone, but I really think leaning more on where you're getting your bonuses from is the best way to approach your list building in terms of that split. Any other takes on that apart from that?
Well, just quickly, because Rob, you mentioned playing Toha before. Would you bother taking hackers in this tournament, given that they the Toha hackers are not well regarded?
Are terrible, are hot trash. Probably not, but the only I'm not sure about this yet. I'm not at a point where I've actually got lists that are serious contenders for the event. But the reason why I would probably not is of all of the scenarios that want hackers, one of them is unmasking, and Toha have an advantage in unmasking, provided they can press the buttons. They're the best faction in the game at killing enemy HVTs because they can do it trivially through walls. Yeah. So I think there's an alternate path for Toha where they don't need the hacker advantage as much.
So I want to take tack to this, and obviously being Ariadna, the hackers are
not good.
Practically non-existent. So for this one, I'd almost do something that I would try and do something that I've never really had the opportunity to do before, which is have 2 lists that play differently, like an Alpha Strike list and a really defensive list or something like that.
So not build for the mission, but just build for.
Yeah, or I've heard it before, like built for the table, so a really close in table and a really spread out table, that sort of thing.
Yes, a viable way of doing.
What do you think?
I'm a bit of a tragic and have been trying to make that approach work for like a year and a half now, and I have not quite succeeded, but maybe this time.
I think you're almost forced to with Ariadna with these missions, because you're going to be taking paramedics and forward observers because they're the only specialists you got anyway. So you've got to find another way of splitting your list, whatever that might be. It's not going to be mission based because, maybe like you might have one that's, I'm going to take it for supremacy. That might be the only thing you consider. Like, this is a bit better at holding points.
You've actually got... Oh, go.
No, go ahead, Rob.
You've got the similar problem. It's the same problem from the other perspective when you play Combined Army. All of your specialists basically are going to be hackers anyway, except Dr. Worm. So you're drowning in hackers. So what you want to do... my preferred approach is to build one list for when you have the option to kill all of your opponent's hackers, and then one list for when you're playing into Ariadna or Toha or maybe Hack Islam. Well, no, they're hacking faction.
Yeah,
when you're playing into, because those are viable factions.
Yeah, that's another one I was thinking is like trying to split up the factions in Infinity and being like, I'm going to take this list for these armies and this list for these armies.
My hot take is you could bring one list to all 5 of these missions and do and win.
I don't
Agreed.
disagree with that at all. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no clear split. Like, sure, on the bonuses, that's a nice split, but the lists could be exactly the same. And just if you can swap the hackers out for doctors, like it's paramedics. It's not. There's nothing in this 5 that really makes me go, oh, I better remember to take this because it's going to be useful in all of the missions.
And I really like that. It means that I think it makes it more.
Yeah.
I think it makes it more accessible. It makes it.
It's not like
makes
no
it
before
easy,
where
it makes it easier for a more casual player to look at it and say, I don't have to spend weeks and weeks and weeks play testing how and fine tuning these lists because it's not that kind of lineup, right? You kind of did have to do that for, say, for example, for Nova Core, right?
Yeah.
Looking at this lineup for CanCon, it's the opposite.
That's why I dig this lineup.
Yeah.
One way that you might choose to split it for a couple of factions, so potentially Ariadne, but especially Nomads, is you might choose to do a 4-1 split where you have one list for all of the scenarios that don't have exclusion zones and one list for unmasking, because that can really mess with some factions.
Yeah, I know, that's a good point. Yeah, definitely unmasking is the outlier in that it's the only one with exclusion zone. Yeah.
And it's technically economical because you're not wasting your points on extra deployment that you never get to use.
Yep. Another thing to consider, just as a general theme, I don't know if this necessarily impact like your list split, but when you're writing your list, you mentioned this before, a bunch of the scenarios have got benefits from enough scenarios have got benefits from multi-terrain that you can probably account for it in both of your lists, and enough scenarios have a free irregular troop that you can probably account for it in both of your lists.
Yeah, and actually on that, I was thinking about this today while I was I was on the toilet. I was thinking about it, and I was like, this is the first season where I've looked at list and building a list, and I get to 14 orders, and I'm like, yeah, it seems fine because I've got the mission I'm playing gets a free CSU. There's an irregular order. I already got sensor bot. There's attack awareness order. I don't feel like I'm like trying to, like, obviously getting to 15 orders is still probably optimal, but I like how this is more of a season discussion, but that I don't feel like I'm being pushed to having 14 orders. Now, whether that means that we see more heavier pieces coming out, I don't know. But I guess that leads into my question I was about to ask is, does this selection favor tags? Is the eternal question that I ask all the time.
I think this particular lineup, I think, is almost antithetical to tags. There's so much for like ignoring Ariadne and all that. There's so much, especially for the first 3. That you want to push up your specialist, and there's so much need for hackers in. Well, there's a need for hackers and acquisition and unmasking that if you've got a tag, you probably going to have to willingly walk into potentially walk into just this hacking net that's sitting there, right? And it's almost by design.
Yeah.
There's a couple of scenarios where, like, acquisition and supremacy are scenarios where you can feel quite comfortable with a tag where they've got specific utility. Otherwise, you're never going to go wrong. Like, you're never ever going to go wrong with the fire support tag, right? Like, it's a really big gun. It's a super efficient big gun. You're not hurting yourself by taking one. But am I looking at these and being like, oh, I should play a tag faction? No, tags are part of the force mix.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we could probably start to wrap it up now. We've been rambling long enough about about this event. So I mean, just sort of any final thoughts from anyone? Kev, I think you wanted to say something.
Oh, it was just about the do we have people who are going? Have they decided on their faction yet?
Oh, you missed what I said. I had 7 factions I was still deciding between.
Okay then, never mind.
Yeah, cool. Well, Rob, was there any last things you wanted to talk about then before we sign off?
Just a reminder, registrations are still open. We would love for people to register sooner rather than later if you think you can make it. It guarantees that we have not just space, but ample space, because it's a popular convention. Every system is looking for space to run their events. So, I mean, what I'm
But-
saying here is
but-
please register or Age of Sigmar will eat us.
Age of Sigmar will eat everything, all right?
Get your regos in. You can register. Like, listen, there's an event URL that will be in the show notes. But if you just Google CanCon, you will find the site, and from the site you'll be able to register.
Cool. Well, I think we can probably sign off then.
Does anyone have any final thoughts before just like Val and yourself, Nick? Are you happy with nothing else you want to say?
All good.
All right,
Cool.
Well, guys, I've been Nick.
I've been Jacob.
I'll be Val.
I've been Kevin.
I guess I've been Rob.
Yes, you have. And thank you so much again, Rob, for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thanks.
And you've been listening to Lost Lieutenant.